Morning, Commissioner.
Good morning. Sorry, I was looking at the public testimony coming in. Good morning.
Morning, everybody.
Morning, Chair.
Morning.
There we go. We can't start the party without our administrator. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for September 9th, 2021. And Christian, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Wait. I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance
to the
to
flag
the flag
of the
of the
United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you, everybody. And we'll start with our calendar session. Do we have anything to add to the joint calendar? I know we've got AOC Day on Monday. Anything in addition to that?
Chair, the redistricting hearing is tonight.
Can hear you.
Oh,
I can hear you, Commissioner Bershauer.
okay. Can't hear me?
No.
Uh-oh.
Is that me? Maybe I
You
can't
know,
hear everybody.
I know what we should do. Commissioner Bershauer should
Can you
speak,
hear?
and then I will tell you.
Can anybody? I can't hear anybody.
Chair, I can hear you.
You guys can hear?
I think, yeah.
Okay, well,
Commissioner Bershauer, you were saying that redistricting hearing is
Yeah.
tonight.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
get off and come back on. Sorry about that. I'm not hearing anybody.
Vice Chair, do you want to pause us?
We are going to pause the September 9th BOC meeting until Chair Starrett returns.
And I will say, Vice Chair, that I am going to be at RIAC, so I will not be at the redistricting hearing.
Well, that was fun. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what that was, but thank you all for your patience. Okay.
Chair, can you
We'll
hear
start
me?
out with, so there's nothing else for the joint calendar? Commissioner Bershauer.
Should we test it? Can you hear us? Ah.
Nope.
Okay, well, my two calendar things are redistricting
Here
hearing
comes
tonight.
Carrie's already been in here. Everything looks fine here, but can you hear me?
We can even hear that door close or open. And Vice Chair, what was the second thing that you were doing? This is just so that I know.
So the redistricting tonight is
Everything is-
virtual. So starts at 5:30 tonight, virtual. The other thing is that we might have more than one of us at the See You Later Foundation run on Saturday for September 11th. So that's in the morning.
Can someone talk?
Yes, we can.
Oh. What was it?
Yay!
We don't know, but Ken did whatever it was.
Just don't touch anything.
We are not going to ask any questions.
Chair, we
Wow.
call it random clicking in our house.
That's what happened. Thank you. I don't know what that was about, guys. I apologize. I don't know what was different there. All righty. So did you have something, someone else? Go back to the joint calendar for the third time. Sorry.
Sure, I'll repeat it for Carrie because she might need to know. But tonight is the redistricting hearing. It's virtual, starts at 5:30. So there may be more than one of us testifying. And then the other one is the See You Later Foundation run/walk on Saturday, September 11th. And I think that starts at 8.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything else?
And I think that's it, Chair. And then we have Road Improvement Advisory Committee as well tonight. But so I won't be at the CD1 hearing.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to public comment. And thanks to Carolina, we've received public comment and she updated us as late as just a few minutes ago. So thank you to everybody who sent in a public comment on agenda items or just in general. We don't have a work session. We don't have department updates. And we have a consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented, Chair.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Commissioner Bershauer.
Chair, I would ask that we remove one of the items from the consent agenda for consideration.
Okay, and
item G1, please.
remove it from the consent agenda for further consideration next week, or just remove it
For later in the discussion.
later in the, okay, all right. So we have a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item G1. Do we have further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. On to old business, we have none. Other business is item I1, consideration of approval and submission of the 2021 Habitat Conservation Plan Annual Compliance Report. Those of us who've been around for a long time, I'm sure Ken has lots of memories about the butterfly and the whole process. So for those of you who've had an opportunity to read the update, and do we have any questions, and do we have a motion to approve?
I would move that we approve the habitat plan and submit it. Thank you.
A motion to approve item I1, further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes, and thanks to everybody who makes that happen every year. On to item I2, consideration of approval to authorize Public Works to proceed with an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Carlton for the Meadow Lake Road paving project. Do we have any questions, Commissioner Bershauer?
Chair, just for a point of clarification, I believe we were supposed to or wanted to discuss the ARPA update, and that is not on the agenda.
So Ken, were we going to just do a high level update on where we're at, or we have further discussion next week?
Actually, I was going to be prepared that once we get through the agenda items, I could come back and give that update at the end of other business, and then also talk about scheduling some upcoming work sessions.
Sounds good. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for flagging that.
Yes, thank you. So motion to approve item I2.
I move that we approve item I2, Chair.
Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. On to item I3, consideration of approval of extending the COVID-19 paid administrative leave policy per board order 2091 effective September 11th, 2021 through October 10th, 2021. Is this, Ken, going to give us enough time, or is that date more limited?
The date selected is when the policy was originally adopted. It could be extended in increments of 30 days. And so that's why we proposed just a 30-day extension. And if it looks like we're going to need to continue it prior to the expiration date, we'll come back and ask for another 30 days if needed.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve item I3. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes. On to item I4, consideration of approval of the quote and purchase of 40 Lenovo ThinkBook 14S yoga laptops from Tech Heads in the amount of $54,634.80, retroactive to August 25th, 2021. Ken?
And I'll just speak to this briefly. It's in the packet. This was part of the replacement schedule that we do for PCs and laptops. And the reason we're asking for it to be a retroactive approval is IT's having to navigate various supply chain and pricing agreements. And so Tech Heads had the equipment in, he was able to get this before we were expecting a price increase that was also going to get into the rollout. So timing wise, working with Shane, we went ahead and made the order, and that's why it's coming back before you for a retroactive approval. So the timing, trying to navigate both supply issues and pricing issues that on this type of equipment, and at the same time trying to keep up on a replacement schedule presents some challenges.
Well, thank you. And and our thanks go to the team for being on top of that. So thank you. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move that we approve.
Motion to approve item I4. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. On to item I5, consideration of the ratification of amendment number 3 to agreement number 159384 between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and the Oregon Health Authority per board order 19-350 for the Veterans Peer Delivered Services. Are there any questions about this? If not,
No, Chair.
I would move approval. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. On to item I6, consideration of approval to distribute a letter via email to county employees regarding mandated COVID-19 vaccinations. Commissioner Bershauer, this is your submission.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So obviously, the mandates that have come down from the governor have come very quickly and are causing some confusion and a lot of fear over folks losing their employment. And that applies to us because we employ individuals who work in the healthcare fields or are connected to healthcare fields. And the purpose of this letter is to reassure county employees that we prioritize their employment, that we don't believe that anyone should lose their job and lose their livelihood for their choice on receiving the COVID vaccination or not. I would like to clarify the process because I've been fielding phone calls left and right of folks and employees that are just thoroughly confused, and there's a lot of fear out there. And unfortunately, they're reporting that there's been some internal pressure and, if you want to call it bullying. And so I really want to tamp down on that and make a statement and make it very clear that the Board of Commissioners does support them. We do support their right to medical choice, and that we don't expect that anyone who works for the county is going to lose employment over this mandate.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know, I'm not sure, I'm assuming the other commissioners but have had conversations, but in conversations with county council and our administrator, there are just so many unknowns about this as far as, I've got questions about informed consent and where do we fit in terms of liability should there be an adverse event, or where do we fit in the chain of who is actually, we know we're not doing the mandating, but we are the arbiter of that. So there are so many unknowns, and we're not alone because lots of other county commissioners are having the same issues and facing some concerns about a shortage of workers for many who either would get an exemption / exception, which is a whole nother story, or those who would not be able to would not be permitted to work in their field. So then are we putting people in places just to keep them on the payroll, but they're not doing their job? So there's just so much here that it really hasn't been, determined. And I don't know, Christian, where we're at, but I know that I'm not alone with having talked to other commissioners who say that absolutely no one on our watch should lose or will lose their employment as a result of making a personal decision about their medical care. So did you want to weigh in on some of the items we talked about regarding liability and those types of things?
Yeah, if there's a specific question, I'm happy to answer it, but there was a lot in there. I just want to make sure I get the board the information that you want. But as you said, and as has been discussed, there are lots of issues and lots of things that we are taking into consideration and that Ken and the rest of administration are looking at, and as we try to navigate this as best we can. You're absolutely right. Everyone across the state is dealing with this. We're seeing some trends emerge. I don't know that we've got clarification yet. We've got evolving guidance from the state that's helped in some areas, but still has left some other areas less than clear. We've started to see what some other jurisdictions are doing in terms of some of the policies that they're implementing and some of the positions they're taking in their interpretation of the rule. But it is fast moving and evolving, and I think I've used this term before. Feels like we're on shifting sands at times. So if there are particular questions about sort of where we are in terms of our policy approach, or if the board wants to have a broader discussion about what they would like to see as our policy approach, I think that would be a worthwhile conversation to have.
I think one of the questions that we're getting is really, what does this mean for said employee who says I'm choosing not to take the vaccine and is now in one of those positions where they do interface with either healthcare or any of the other. So there is that question. And then also, I believe today is the deadline to receive the first shot, to have them both received by the October 18th deadline. So I want to make sure, is that correct? Is it today or tomorrow?
I think that I'm not sure about the date, but that would, if my understanding is that would apply to either of the two vaccines that require a 2-dose regimen. There is another vaccine that is a single shot vaccine that there is additional time still for folks who are interested in getting that vaccine. But yeah, I think that the timeline you're mentioning is right around the corner for folks who are on the two-shot regimen.
Thank you, Ken.
And yeah, and I just wanted to add, because really the only really clear deadline that's in the OAR is when folks are fully are supposed to be vaccinated that are subject to the vaccine requirements. And there are several moving pieces that relates to, depending on the vaccine that you're receiving, like Christian was talking about. Because again, to be fully vaccinated, you have to have the 2 doses, and then you have to have the 14-day period, and after that, and Director Manfred could probably share more specifics about how that works. I'm not going to necessarily get into the logistics on that, because I'm definitely not an expert on that. So there are some moving pieces, because it depends if it's the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccines, which are the 2-shot, and then to be able to get the 2 shots and the 14-day period. That being said, part of the discussions that we're having too is we have an understanding that there is this October 18th deadline per the OAR, and having discussions on what it would look like for employees that maybe have started the series, or how we kind of handle or do reassignments or accommodate that if there's still that waiting period. The second part, because I know we covered a lot here, and I wanted an opportunity to kind of weigh in a little bit, because again, I'm looking at it, the state came down with this mandate. Trying to operate, it's very clear in the guidance that we received. It's unlawful for us to continue to employ people that are subject to the mandate moving forward. So we're trying to navigate and ensure that the county's in compliance with the law on this, and lessen our exposure and risk associated to for lack of a better terms, getting sideways with OHA and the state, and having the county subject to fines. At the same time, Human Resources quickly put out a communication went out to employees that are in the departments that are subject, that based on the initial reviews, what we think which departments are going to be subject to the mandate. So it was really a targeted communication that went to those specific departments where we think that a majority or most of those departments are going to be impacted by this mandate. And that information included a lot of the timelines for considerations, keeping in mind that there's 3 vaccines available, depending on the vaccine, on at what point you would be considered fully vaccinated, and some guidance was put out there with some dates. But again, those were, going backwards from the 18th deadline, and what that would look like to get, like, for example, the Moderna, when you would have to start that series and process that. So information was put out. In addition to that, the information was also put out for anyone who has a medical and described a process for anybody requesting a medical or a religious exception, and what forms need to be submitted, and how those would get processed. And keeping in mind that it's not that if an employee has a religious exception to it, that all they have to do is fill out the form and submit it, and good, you can come to work on Monday, or you can come to work on the 19th, business as usual. What that does is it starts similar to what we go through with an ADA accommodation request. It initiates an interactive process that then we have to evaluate and work with that employee on, because we're also obligated to make sure that that employee is not, per the OAR, spreading or contracting the virus by continuing to report to work in an and being unvaccinated. So there's some accommodation discussions and processes that has to happen with those individuals. And it could be everything from PPE, adjusting schedule, reassignment. There's a whole laundry list of considerations that would have to be discussed in order to process that exception. But that was communicated with employees. There's been ongoing discussions. As the county administrator, when I hear, that if employees are complaining to a commissioner that they feel like they're being bullied, we have channels and, for if they feel like they're being bullied by a supervisor or being harassed by coworkers, we do have a supervisory and management structure that I would hope that they would either exercise that by contacting the supervisor, their immediate supervisor, or if it involves their immediate supervisor, they're talking to the department head, or even bringing it directly to our HR department or to me. As well as if they're represented employees, they also have avenues for bringing those concerns and complaints to their union reps. And they can navigate that through the collective bargaining agreement. There's specific steps that are outlined. Based on the communications that I've had with department heads, and the messaging has been very similar to the communications that went out to HR. We have this OAR, we have this law that we have to comply, this OAR we have to comply with as an employer. And there's exceptions available and a process available for acting on, and requesting consideration for getting these exceptions. And, we're trying to navigate this, like Christian was saying, with the shifting sands and the updates that are coming out from OHA on the clarity on who's included and who's not included, and trying to get clarity around that. So again, we're trying to navigate this the best we can. We're trying to get information out to those employees. And if employees have questions, I would hope that they're still engaging in conversations with their immediate supervisors and department heads, because I'm not getting a lot of feedback from departments that these conversations are taking place.
Thank you, Ken. Commissioner Burschauer.
Thank you, Chair. In the public testimony are a few, or several actually, testimony that was submitted by county employees who feel and fear that there will be retribution against them if they do sign the letter that they wrote. So it's been submitted under my name. I welcome an open door policy. If employees want to reach out to any of us and talk about concerns, absolutely. That's why we're here. That's part of our job. I think that a common feedback that I'm getting, at least, is that union leaders haven't exactly been helpful or forthcoming with information on how to navigate some of these mandates. So that's being self-reported from some employees. I guess my issue is that if I was running a business and I was subjected to this mandate, I would make the process very clear that we do have to comply. Right? We have to either have employees submit proof of vaccination, or we have an exemption process. And whether it's exception or exemption, we have to accept both of them. An exemption is protected by Title VII. So if an employee submits an exemption and says, I have a religious issue or a medical issue with this vaccine mandate, we have to accept that. It's part of their constitutional rights. So then the process becomes what happens next. And I think that what I'm hoping to get out of this conversation today is a very clear statement that if you are going through the process of exemption, and whether that includes the exception as well, which it sounds like it has to, we are going to respect the fact that you are at a point where you are requesting to be exempted from the vaccine mandate. And we're not going to be a religious HR tribunal and criticize your religious beliefs or do X, Y, and Z and come to the conclusion that your exception or exemption is not valid. That's what I don't want to see, because that's just wrong. So then the question becomes, what happens next? And as far as I can see, looking at the OARs, employees are not forbidden from working in a healthcare setting or having face-to-face contact with individuals in a healthcare setting if they, one, provide proof of vaccination, or two, have a valid exemption. So it seems like the rule states that we can make those rules as an employer. And that could include many different things. That it could include higher levels of PPE. It could include shifting the schedules. It can include a lot of different things. But what I don't want it to include is things that make employees feel like they're being punished for providing an exemption. So if we're going to stick them on graveyard shift, or if we're going to put them on unpaid leave, or if we're going to do any sort of those things, that's what I don't want to see. That's not protecting their employment. So, and I'm also wondering what our plan is for individuals who are vaccinated, who test positive for COVID, because the latest OHA numbers are saying that 25% of the deaths that we've seen were from fully vaccinated individuals. So we know vaccinated individuals can catch COVID, they can spread COVID. So what happens when someone in the workplace who has been fully vaccinated tests positive? Are they going to be treated to the same degree that we are classifying unvaccinated employees? I think these are some very important conversations that we need to have some clarity coming out of today.
Thank you. Ken, did you want to respond before Commissioner Kula weighs in?
And Chair, I was just going to ask that we make sure that we hear from Ken. So that was my comment for now.
Okay, so my thoughts is, as I was mentioning earlier, as part of the process of, if somebody requests an exemption or exception per the forms and the requests, number one, we are not looking at putting together any type of review committee or as the commissioner mentioned, a tribunal. That's not the intent to get into, and it's really about the religious exception in particular. The medical one does come with, you have to provide a doctor's note that supports the medical exception. The religious exception are firmly, that's based on a firmly religious belief that's included in there. We're going to rely on the form that they're affirming that they have a religious belief that prohibits them from getting that vaccination. And we're going to take that and then enter into the interactive resolution process on trying to find a means that we're going to accept this. Now, how can we continue to work with these employees and have these employees continue to be employed with the county and provide services and make the required accommodations possible? And but again, one of the challenges that we have is, what's a reasonable accommodation? Because we're really talking about either we have to have options available for being able to, whether it's reassignment, working different shifts, PPE. There's a whole laundry list of things that are available to us. And one of the challenges that we have is we're going to have to, the work that they're not going to be able to necessarily, in some cases, there is the potential that they might not be able to continue with the essential functions of their position as they were hired to do. So we're going to have to make some accommodations to figure out, on number one, how they continue to perform their essential functions of their position, and what accommodations we can make to allow them to continue. And if we exhaust all that and we find that we just have a unique position that they can't continue to do that just because of the nature of the work or the nature of the job, that there's not accommodations available to really change that. And then we have to look at reassignment, and then I have to figure out what departments have to figure out, and I have to determine how do we continue to have these folks, or what services they're providing, or it's an ongoing interactive discussion, and it's not an easy one. I have no idea how many we're talking about. I haven't seen requests that really quantifies on how many employees we're talking about. And then also keeping in mind that it's not like that the work that they were performing is now suddenly going to stop, because now we're going to have to figure out on how we're going to backfill those operational areas that and who's going to do that work. So there is accommodations that's built in. It's an interactive process that in order to move forward, that's going to be part of this entire process. And I'm trying to think, there was something else I wanted to talk about, but I just lost it. So maybe I'll come back to it, but another question. But again, we have to have the flexibility to, in order to go in, to sit down with the employee, do this interactive process and figure out what's going to work and what isn't going to work. Oh, now I remember, as far as somebody testing positive for COVID, vaccinated or unvaccinated or whatever the status, we've been handling that. That's why the administrative leave's available. We have FET available, to ensure that we're complying with any quarantine requirements and all of those things. That's been in place, and we've been navigating that since March of last year. And so that would really go unchanged. So if we had someone vaccinated or not, who's in a workplace setting that informs us that, hey, I've been quarantined or I test positive, we would follow the recommendations from public health on how we handle those quarantines and the contact tracing and everything else.
Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. So here's what I can't wrap my head around. Okay, we have 2 employees that work in juvenile detention, let's say, and they have face-to-face contact with the youth that's coming in and out of our facility. And those would be considered frontline workers that fall under this mandate, apparently. One is vaccinated, one is not. And yet both can catch COVID and spread COVID, right? And the whole point of this mandate is to reduce the spread of COVID. So now we're going to apply special rules to the one who is not vaccinated. And yet the one who is vaccinated does not receive the special rules, despite the fact that they can catch and spread COVID either to their fellow coworkers or to the youth in their care. And my question is, how does that get us to the point of the goal of limiting the spread of COVID? And how is that not a problem to tell the juvenile detention employee that is not vaccinated that they cannot have contact with the youth? And so we're going to have to put you on, graveyard. We're going to have to pull you out of this department and send you somewhere else, and not feel like that's punishment. And by the way, these folks have been working for us for the past 18 months during all of this, regardless of their vaccination status. And yet here we are creating 2 different classifications of employees, and it feels wrong to me. I don't want to see that. So if the mitigation strategy for unvaccinated people is, you have to have a temperature check when you come into work, something like that, where it's common sense, we want to make sure people are healthy when they're coming into work, that's fine. Beef up the PPE, that's fine. But if we're getting into a situation where we're classifying employees now as unvaccinated and they are being punished, I have a problem with that. I'm not going to support that internal policy.
Well, it's not an internal policy because it's not something that we're designing. We are put in a position where we basically are being told to do this or else we'll face fines. And we know that the strong arm of OHA and OSHA and the governor's office has not been shy about, and I'm going to use the term weaponizing state agencies. We've seen it before, and I don't doubt we'll see it again. When we're put in a position where the county now is going to be, as I say, the arbiter of this, we're the ones who are following the orders. I always like to say, I'm just doing my job is not a defense. It wasn't in Nuremberg and it shouldn't be here. And at some point, if there's a cog in the wheel that says, no, I refuse to comply and do this to our workers. However, we are still dealing with putting the onus of this on our administration to try to deal with the problems we're having with the state. So I understand the difficult place that the county is in because they're being told, do this or else. So we either say, go ahead and fine us, and then we're using taxpayer dollars to do that, although there are, I don't know, maybe we use the interest from the ARPA funds to pay the fines or something creative like that. But that's another discussion. What I have to understand is, how do we support our employees? Because I do believe that we should be supporting them and defending them and protecting them. And then how do we understand what the county's position is in? And I think at one point we have to say, at what point are we going to say, we can't do this? We can't comply because we're going to have a shortage across the street at juvenile detention, or we're going to have a problem in the jail, or we have people that have been with us for years and years and years, and now we're going to put them in a mask and send them across the street to some office. I don't want to do that. I also don't know where is this a catch-22? Commissioner Kula.
Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner Bershauer, I apologize. I'm really not jumping the line. I raised my hand earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt. I appreciate, Commissioner Starrett, your kind of laying out of the scenario that this is really with regard to a vaccine mandate for this particular category of individuals. And what I hear you saying is that you are supporting workers in staying employed and being accommodated as much as possible. At least that's what I was hearing you say. And I want to say that I support you in that. I think that as much as we operationally can be flexible and can accommodate folks who have the exemption from the mandate, that we should do that. And I think that that's a perfectly appropriate policy directive to Ken is, hey, we want you to be flexible, and we also support you in what that looks like. Whether that's that you need more budget for a particular area because they might need this person transferred to that area, or if they need to be on admin leave while we figure this out. I would appreciate a statement from the board that way that supports county administrator and human resources in kind of maximizing the accommodation while still meeting the law and our operational capacity at the county.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to add that statement, and I agree with everything that you said, Commissioner Kuhl, except the statement that says as much as possible, because the as much as possible really just takes a person who's been with us for perhaps 15 or 20 years and says, well, it wasn't possible. So sorry, you're on the chopping block. We can't find a place for you. And I don't think that's ever going to be defensible. I think at some point, I know that there are lots of counties that are going to be addressing this on Monday at AOC as far as they're saying we're going to have shortages and we're not going to be able to deal with this. What do we say to the governor? It's one of those, I always go back to that unfunded mandate. This is one of those mandates where we really are going to be hard pressed to maintain our staffing and our services. And so I think at some point, while we're going to look for a greater other counties to throw in on Monday, I think there has to be a county that's willing to say, this far and no farther. You're asking us to put our staffing and our services in jeopardy. And while we might say, well, this is our job and we have to do it because we were told, at what point can we say to our county council, which is what I would like to do, find a way, this is putting you in a difficult position, Christian, find a way to defend us against this unreasonable, unconstitutional, and unethical mandate, which is going to hurt not only our employees, but the people that we serve. So that would be my statement is we're going to be, don't feel compelled, number one, to get that first shot. If you're not willing to do it and you don't want to do it, don't feel under the gun for that. That if somebody hands us an exception or an exemption and doesn't have their, whatever, we'll put it in the file and we'll make sure that you're covered. But what I don't want to see is that we take this lying down.
And Chair, I want to, if I may just add perhaps a rejoinder, is that we can advocate and have a policy directive to a county administrator and to health and human resources that says work on this to retain these employees, and we will find the funding if there needs to be a transfer, if there needs to be additional staffing in human resources. But why I said as much as possible, everything possible, is because it also requires the employee to remain flexible and open. So if the employee, and so I'm just saying that if human resources and county administrators say, okay, here's what we need to do in order to comply with the state and also to accommodate you, but that person is not willing to participate in such accommodations, then we don't really have as a county, we don't have a place then to go unless you're willing to just say, yeah, you do whatever you want. And so I'm just saying that it requires both parties in this situation to be flexible and willing to accommodate.
I understand
A two to tango, I guess, would be a way to say it.
Sure, I understand. There has to be a collaboration here because we are in a very difficult position. What I would say that this changes the conditions of employment and what they were hired to do and what we hired them to do on what specific schedule. So a couple of things I would say: if you belong to a union, then your union is not doing their job if they're not going to bat for this accommodation, because we hear them going to bat over what kind of boots to buy in public works and all these other what are seemingly frivolous things compared to this. But where's the union standing up for the people who want an accommodation in this way against what is just become really heavy-handed in my estimation? So I think that the unions need to take their ownership of how they can engage here and protect their employees. And then we also need to push back on the state. That's where I'm coming from. I can't.
And I just wanted to add, I think one of the important parts that we are actively in communications with the union leadership. We've also have received a demand to bargain from Teamsters. So there are discussions about, and we are engaged in those discussions with union leadership about, and I know ASME in particular has sent, some communications and shared some ideas, but I'm still trying to, with my recent absence, I'm getting myself caught up to speed on a lot of these and looking at some of the discussions and proposals that have been sent our direction. So, we are in communication with the unions on this topic as well.
Thank you. So the unions, are they making any moves towards defending those who say they don't want to be required to not only take the vaccine, but also to have their work in any way materially changed as far as schedules or scope of work?
Outside of just the communications we haven't really gotten into really substantive, what I would call negotiations, or where we've actually sat down under a demand to bargain umbrella to really get into those details. But to date, because we have this mandate that's in place, so far the county has not taken any actions or adverse actions, in implementing this, because we haven't met the deadline. We're not at the deadline to where we would end up in a situation to where we're considering separating with an employee because they are not in compliance with they're not in compliance with the mandate. So, that's why it's really challenging. And I'm kind of looking to Christian because I also want to be, how much detail we really want to get into around some of the discussions that we may be talking about at the bargaining table, in this format. If we're going to because typically we've done, discussions about bargaining and updates when, especially when we're talking about positions that the county may be taking or presenting at the table. We usually have those conversations in an executive session. But I just wanted to highlight, that we are in communications, because I know this is a topic for not just employees, employers, labor organizations, everyone. We're all trying to navigate this mandate, and I'm simply looking at it from this mandate is in place. We as an employer, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm following the law and keeping us compliant with OAR, with the OAR, and I'm trying to minimize the risk, while at the same time trying to keep an eye on our operations and services that we provide, on how we're going to be able to sustain the same level of concern. And I think the other part that I would say that, when we're looking at that, because again, I don't have, HR has shared a number of requests that we've received at this point, and it looks like the latest is we've gotten 10. So again, I want to be careful too, because I really don't know what the operational impact might look like, because I haven't really, outside of the 10, forms that HR has received, I'm not sure exactly what the operational impacts would be, how many accommodation requests we're going to have to make, where there may be gaps in coverage, where we're going to have to utilize, reassignment or reorganization in areas to ensure that they're, to minimize disruption to service delivery. Again, a lot of that is still up in the air because I don't have a full picture on how many exception requests we're going to receive.
Is the sheriff available? I know that Carrie Hinton, thank you, Carrie, for letting us know that Sheriff Fenson would be available if we had questions about how this would impact any of his department. If he is available, I think it would be really good to hear from him. I know that some law enforcement agencies, or I guess Portland, is saying that there he is. There's the sheriff. So I was wondering what OSAA is saying about this. So appreciate the sheriff being available. Thank you.
I
Go
just
ahead,
wanted
Sheriff.
a Christian also had unmuted himself to get ready to say something a few minutes ago, but I'm guessing he's going to pass on it for now.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner.
That's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I can weigh in later after we hear from our sheriff.
Sheriff, thanks for being available.
Yeah, no, not a problem. I appreciate it.
Good morning.
So to start off with the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, obviously when we received the direction from the Oregon Health Authority, our county, or our council, what we would refer to as our county council, the lead council for Oregon State Sheriff's Association, started doing a lot of research and was finding that, which is what a lot of us are learning, is that there are a lot of case law and a lot of Supreme Court rulings behind these type of mandates, and whether or not they're can be upheld or they're legal. And so we reached out to the director of the Oregon Health Authority, Pat Allen, and tried to have conversations with him specifically for our jail. We were trying to determine whether or not we can specify or delineate specific medical areas within our facility, or if just because we provide a medical service within our jail, does that just blanket mean everything is going to be considered the entire facility, for example. Those conversations went pretty well. He added some verbiage that indicated that their intent for the Oregon Health Authority was not to pass this down to our patrol division staff, which is good news. The most recent FAQ that came out from the Oregon Health Authority earlier this week added some further clarification to that piece, which is now I noticed the city of Portland is now backtracking on requiring their police department PPV officers to be vaccinated due to that new FAQ, which would mean that that would support the decision not to require that to be had on our patrol division. I struggled when I got that particular piece because my position's always been, I think it's up to the person. It needs to be personal choice. If staff choose to be vaccinated, then that's their choice. If staff choose not to be vaccinated, that's also their choice. And I agree with Commissioner Bershauer. I question how this whole process is going to now make our jail safer. If I now decided on October 19th, now half my staff has to wear masks and the other half, we're already wearing cloth masks, and just this vaccine isn't going to necessarily change what we've been doing for the last 18 months. But that being said, as I've communicated with Christian and Ken Huffer a lot about, is that ultimately the county is going to be the one who's going to be having to make that administrative personnel decision as to whether or not they're going to accept the accommodation and what kind of accommodations we're going to offer. Operationally, it could put a hindrance in our facility if we have to, or if we lose staff. I think to Commissioner Bershauer's point about the scheduling piece, in talking with the Oregon Health Authority, that's one of their big options for a accommodation is adjusting the individual schedules so that they are minimizing their contact with AICs, which would be a night shift. And I agree, that seems to be penalizing those who are choosing not to be vaccinated versus the ones who are. And for your comment, Commissioner Starrett, about the union, I can tell you just the initial conversations I've had with them. I believe that they want to fight for their represented employees. However, it's been made pretty clear by multiple high-level labor attorneys throughout Oregon and Washington that the Supreme Court rulings from over 100 years ago and all the other cases that have come down since then are making it virtually impossible and not even something that the unions are even able to put up a fight for on this particular mandate, because it's coming from the Oregon Health Authority. So that being said, we're hopeful that the Oregon Health Authority will still allow us to delineate a medical section so I can break off parts of my facility and say this is medical, this is not. And it would require us to kind of change the way we do things with operationally in our facility, which would require staff who are currently vaccinated to be the only ones who can enter into the medical area if they need to. Washington County has taken the position that they've deemed that the jail setting is not going to be considered a medical facility per the OHA FAQ, and they are only going to require their medical staff to be vaccinated. Not sure what the Oregon Health Authority's take is going to be on that, but I'm sure as we continue to move forward, as County Council has already said, it's ever changing. The sands continue to shift. And my guess is this time next week, we'll have a new list of FAQs from Oregon Health Authority that hopefully will further define what it means for our jail population.
Thank you, Sheriff. Have you had any communications with, I know some sheriffs in more rural areas are talking about absolutely making a statement that they're not going to comply because they are going to lose staff, and they just by sheer numbers don't have enough to be able to take care of what they're tasked with taking care of. Have you been hearing any of that? Because I know the other commissioners in the smaller rural areas are saying pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, so the first meeting we had, I think roughly 34 of the 36 counties represented on our discussion. That was the initial, no, we can't do this, we can't make it work. When we talked about the concept of trying to get the Oregon Health Authority to the point where we could identify specific areas in our facilities as medical facilities, they all agreed that that would be a very good compromise, because in all those counties, even the ones that were saying, no, we absolutely cannot make this work, they all have a small percentage of staff that chose to get vaccinated. And so they felt that if we could get to that point, they would not require their staff to get vaccinated, and they would still be able to comply with the new mandate. I know some counties have just flat out said, no, we're not gonna require it at all, and we'll just go ahead and start paying the fine. Send us the bill. And I don't know if that's a stance that they're trying to find out is, is on October 19th, are they going to be knocking on our door asking for proof that we've complied? And I don't know if that's just them posturing, saying, yeah, go ahead and make us do this and we can reconsider. So it's initially it was going to be a lot of, no, we can't make this work, when we started having the conversation of constitutionally, the counties may be put in a very bad spot, and let's try to find a way to negotiate what the intent was with Oregon Health Authority, because their intent is specifically medical setting. They really want to be, when they have people who are a vulnerable population being provided a medical service, that is what their intent is on this particular vaccine process. And the only way that they could cover medical facilities or medical treatment that's provided in a institution like our jail, they had to be very open and broad with their interpretation, which is the reason why we're having all the difficulties, because they just lumped the jails into it because it's so vague on their definition. So what we're asking them to do is try to be a little bit more direct on what that definition means, and let us help you narrow that scope down to a very specific medical spot. And so those small rural counties, even though they don't have large medical units in most of those counties, then the inmates are in their cell and the medical staff goes to them. They've all been talking as jail commanders across the state. How can we create locations within those jails that we can call a medical area, so that we can start accommodating for that, if that is an option?
Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff. Christian, did you want to weigh in at some point?
Yeah, and the sheriff covered much of what I might have had to say about one of the primary areas where we've had questions, which is the scope of the application of the mandate to law enforcement generally, right? Patrol, corrections deputies, and also our parole and probation staff. Speaking of parole and probation, we did yesterday also get a demand to bargain from the FAPO union. So we've received a demand now from YCEA. Well, actually, we haven't from YCEA, but they've been reaching out. We've been having some discussions with them about how the county might approach this, but we have received a demand to bargain from the Teamsters and from FAPO. And one of the points that was discussed earlier, what I'm hearing is, I think, a general consensus that we need to comply. Right. And it sounds like there is, generally support from the board with our efforts to comply. And that's clearly what we're going to try and do. That being said, accommodations and receiving and reviewing and approving exceptions and exemptions is certainly a big part of that process, and something that we are doing and will continue to do. So hopefully that will go a long way towards addressing a lot of the concerns that folks have about whether or not they are going to be, required or feel as though they have to make a choice between getting the vaccine and keeping their job. So hopefully that accommodation process will deal with the majority, if not almost all, of the concerns that folks have. And the question will come down to then what, for those that have an exemption, can we agree on what those accommodations might look like? And can those accommodations allow those employees to continue to work? Hopefully that will deal with the vast majority of the employees who choose not to get vaccinated and file an exemption. What we're probably looking at is a small, hopefully very small, perhaps even as small as zero, assuming it's not zero, small group of employees who choose not to get vaccinated, who we can't reach a accommodation with. The traditional way in which the interactive accommodation process concludes is if it would be an undue hardship, or if there is simply no way that we can accommodate the employee, is to separate. if the board makes a policy choice that that's not going to be an option for employees who are in that category as a result of choosing not to be vaccinated, then we'll need to have other conversations about what else can we try and do to both keep those employees at work and not feel as if they're being punished. And that's the sort of nut of the problem for me, is how big a challenge is that going to be? And I'm hoping it's not going to be a significant problem, because I think everyone can agree if we can accommodate these, as Commissioner Berschauer and others have said, in some reasonable ways, right? Some additional PPE, some maybe some random testing or temperature checks, or ways in which we can both continue to do the best we can to remain in compliance without causing what could be felt by employees as being punished. Hopefully, we'll be able to do that with all of the employees who are impacted by this. And just to touch on something else the sheriff said, yeah, we're still hoping for some additional guidance when it comes to correctional deputies. I think the guidance we got from OHA last Friday makes it a little bit clearer on the patrol side. And I am familiar with what Washington County has done. There's some real discussion going on about what is the reasonable way to interpret what the state has instructed us to do in terms of applying this mandate to healthcare workers in a healthcare setting. You read some of the guidance and it makes it sound like if you are a employee who works in a facility where medical services are being provided, but you're not having direct or even frequent indirect contact, you're still covered. Other parts of the guidance suggest that you could be covered if you work in that setting, but there is a chance that you could provide direct or provide indirect. So it really seems to be whether or not you're providing those services, or whether or not you might just come into contact with patients who are receiving services, or come into contact with other employees who are providing those services. So we're still trying to tease that out. But I think we can all agree no one wants to see anyone lose their job over this. And so that's our challenge, is to find a way to both remain in compliance and achieve that objective.
Thank you, Christian, and thank you, Sheriff. I just want to say that I'm hoping that we can get consensus from the board that not one Yamhill County employee will be terminated as a result of what the governor has done. This is not our decision, and I, for one, no matter what happens, that these people who are exercising their bodily autonomy should not be punished in any way, shape, or form. So I'm hoping that at some point we can get to some consensus on that. Commissioner
Okay.
Kula.
So I would love to know though, so if staff, human resources, county administrator and county council get to a spot and their supervisor where there's perhaps the person is unwilling to accept accommodations because they know that their county commissioners have said that they're not going to let them go no matter what. How does that work? I mean, what does that look like if supervisors can't have them working, HR can't have them working because of a mandate? Do they go on paid admin leave? And are you suggesting that that's what they would do?
What I'm suggesting, and I appreciate it because that's a very difficult question that we're faced with, but we are faced with at some point, again, we say thus far and no farther. I think in my estimation, and I've been very verbal about this, the news has tightened from day one, where we've seen businesses forced to close, we've seen schools closed, we've seen mask mandates, we've seen curfews, we've seen occupancy requirements, and now we're seeing a mandate that says you must take this drug. One size fits all medical intervention, and this is where I think that this was the end game. And at some point, we are going to have to say no. And I think Yamhill County, if the commissioners are not willing to say no, we are the last line of defense. Who will say no to this type of overreach? So to answer your question, what I'm saying is that at some point we are going to say no Yamhill County employee will lose their job, period.
But
Commissioner
Chair, I just want
Burschauer.
to come back to you. What do you mean by that? What does that look like functionally? Are you proposing that anybody who does not want to or chooses not to take the vaccine despite the mandate will be placed on paid administrative leave? Is that what you're proposing? And I just want to note that I don't understand the noose reference. If you want to tease that out a little bit more, I'd love to hear that.
Okay.
Because it's disturbing to me.
It's disturbing. It's been disturbing to people who've lost their businesses, who've relapsed into drug and alcohol abuse, who've watched their children decompensate and go into serious depression. Old and lonely and elderly people who've died alone. That's disturbing to me, Commissioner. And so when I say the noose is tightened, this is something that has happened to every Oregonian who has had to comply with unconstitutional mandates. And as the noose tightens, we see more and more of our liberties go away. So yeah, whether you want to say it's a boot on our neck, if you want to say it's a stranglehold on us, whatever type of illustration you want to use, what I'm saying is that at some point we say enough. And what I'm saying is what it looks like in terms of an employee, whether it's in the sheriff's office, in juvenile detention, or in health and human services. If someone says, no, I'm not going to take this, I'm not going to be forced to take this vaccine, that we're not going to be the ones to say you will lose your job. So what that looks like is they have our guarantee today that it's not going to happen, period.
So Chair, does that mean then that we would just let them stay employed but not on the job? And then how does that work with the capacity issues in, say, juvenile detention? And then, so you're proposing that we pay them to not work?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying we let them do their job, what they were hired to do, what we have asked them to do, and what we're paying them to do, and that they do their job. If OSHA wants to come in or OHA wants to come in and fine us, then I think that we can make the determination if they want to come in and fine us. Let's use our ARPA interest money. Let's find a way to protect these employees. And yeah. I'll throw in a couple of grand worth of fines, and happy to do it. Commissioner Burschauer.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to note that the stress of this conversation should communicate to all of us that this is why these employees are struggling with this immediately. It's why I've been fielding phone calls over the weekend with employees who are in tears over losing their livelihood. So if we feel stressed now, can you imagine what some of our employees are feeling? That's why this conversation is important, and it's why the immediacy of sending this message out to our employees is so important. And I will say that I'm looking at the OARs. The OARs do not say anything, have any requirements about if you have an unvaccinated employee who has an exemption that's been approved, that you have to place them on unpaid leave, or that you have to put them on the graveyard shift. It doesn't say that. And the reason it doesn't say that is because if you own a dental clinic and you have 2 employees and one of them is vaccinated and one is not, you cannot place the unvaccinated employee on unpaid leave or even paid leave. Your business cannot function that way. That's the reason why there is discretion on how we're going to implement this policy. And what I'm saying is, I think most of our employees are fairly reasonable. I think if they were told that the mitigation strategy for if you have an exemption is you're going to have your temperature checked when you come to work. Okay, you're going to have to wear PPE. And frankly, a lot of the folks in juvenile detention are asking for PPE. They are asking for better protection. They're not unwilling to do it. You have to submit to randomized COVID testing. Okay, great. Actually, I think we should be doing that with the entire employee population, because now we know that vaccinated individuals can get and spread COVID. So why wouldn't we? It makes sense. The whole point of this discussion is to send a message to our entire employee population to say that we believe in your right to choose. This is not something that we haven't said before. We've said it repeatedly on this board. And it says that we support your right to exemption because we have to as an employer. And it says that while we are navigating all of this, you are not going to be fired by Yamhill County. It's very specific as to what it says. And by the way, we're not the only county doing this. This came from Marion County. And I'll tell you what, I talked to some of those commissioners after they sent this out. They had phone calls from their employees saying, oh my God, thank you so much. I literally cried tears after I read this email because I was so worried that I was going to lose my livelihood, lose my income, lose my health insurance, all of it. That is what I think we need to do today because the pressure's on, man. And these schedules are coming very quick and fast and people are being threatened. They're being told that if they don't get it, they're going to be isolated at work. It's not acceptable. There needs to be a very strong message that comes out today to our employees, the entire population, whether they're subject to it or not, that says we stand with you, we don't agree with these mandates, and we are going to do everything we can to protect your employment. That's the point of the letter.
Thank you, Ken.
I just want to clarify again, we're still early in the process of receiving exception requests, and we haven't been entering into interactive processes with employees and with any type of ultimatums or discussions about, again, what we have before us is an OAR that's in effect, that we're trying to take the necessary steps to ensure compliance with the OAR. As far as discussions or threats about moving employees to outside of the discussions that we're having right now, I'm not aware of those discussions actually taking place with employees, between managers and employees or HR and employees. Again, we're trying to navigate, and there's not specific criteria because they're trying to allow employers the ability to consider all the various accommodation requests that may be available that are reasonable and that can, be applied for an employee situation down to that specific classification. So whether that's testing, all that is on the table. But again, it's very clear in the OAR, but we still also have an obligation that under the OAR, if we grant an exception, we have to make sure we enter into an interactive process to ensure that we're limiting the spread or that employee contracting COVID. And so that's the language that we're navigating. We're still trying to and like I said before, we haven't even entered into interactive processes with those individuals. We're getting the requests and we're going to be starting that process right now. But as far as employees being threatened to move to a later shift or anything, I don't believe that's happening. Outside of this discussion here, we're talking about possible options in order to accommodate a religious or a medical exception that has been submitted.
Thank you. Commissioner Kula.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ken, for that good clarification. So what I'm hearing Commissioner Bershauer say is that she wants the Board of Commissioners to issue a statement that fully supports that accommodation process around for folks who've submitted an exemption. I think that first, is that accurate reflection? Because I want to go on to the second part of that.
Yeah, but I would also say to vaccinated employees, we have to abide by the rules. So you need to submit proof of vaccination. It applies to both, right?
Oh yeah, that's a good clarification. Yeah, thank you. So I wanted to go on then. So Chair Starrett actually said that her position is that she just wants to not comply. And I will say that I support Commissioner Bershauer's statement, and I don't support Chair Starrett's statement. But the only thing that with the statement that you have submitted for us is that I don't think that we really can and should make the statement about that, no employees will be, I should pull it up, the language of it. Beyond that, I think it's really important for us to stress to employees that they work through the process with county HR, Christian and Ken, and their supervisor.
Yes, I don't think that's mutually exclusive in terms of my statement. I think that if we make a statement today and if we make a commitment to all of the employees in Yamhill County that no one will lose their job as the result of this mandate, that we can say with confidence and knowing that we have great department heads and administration that have worked through a whole lot of issues, maybe nothing as challenging as this, but that we will find a way to keep you employed, and we will find a way to work with you. So when I say we are not going to comply, what I'm saying is that at some point we have to say that we are not going to lay people off because of this mandate. At the end of the day, the net result would not be a Yamhill County employee who walks away from their job as the result of this.
And I want to say, I really appreciate, I forgot to mention this, I really appreciate Sheriff Swenson's work with OSSA and OHA to like really clearly delineate that so that there are fewer people who are subject to it. So thank you, Sheriff. I think that's a good example of supervisors who are working on this right now. It's just he's a different kind of supervisor.
Agreed. Christian, did you want to say something?
Yeah, and I think those are all very good points. And I think to something Commissioner Bershauer said earlier, it will also be important to message to employees the importance of the interactive process, right? That we will be working with them, and we trust that they will be working, and we'll be working with them in good faith, and we trust that they will be working with us in good faith to really try and see if we can't come to an accommodation. And I have a hard time thinking about a scenario where we shouldn't be able to come to some sort of an accommodation. You always don't think about the problems that crop up because they are unexpected. But yeah, I mean, as long as it's clear that the goal here is to be able to accommodate, and that hopefully we'll be able to work together towards that end.
So I'm thinking about the person who works in facilities, or the person who works in IT, who has to go into various settings within the county. How would that impact them? I know, Ken, there's probably been some discussion about that.
There has been discussion on that. And right now with the guidance that we've received, because they do, I mean, we have facility staff that are working inside of HHS facilities that are medical facilities, that right now the current guidance is the mandate would apply to them. But again, we're still trying to navigate, and we're anticipating further refinement and more information coming from OHA and based on this discussion. I wanted to make sure I answered that question. At the same time, I also wanted to take a moment and echo what Christian was saying, because I think one of the challenging parts that we have is, like with any accommodation process, they're not without their challenges, because a lot of times, I've been involved in the past with accommodation requests that have been submitted under ADA, and it requires, at times some outside the box thinking. It requires a lot of discussions. It's a lot of times we have employees coming in that maybe have one idea that doesn't mesh with the proposal. So it has to be an interactive process on how we reach a workable solution. The one thing that I will say, that one of the challenges I have about, we have an OAR, they have a process available for requesting exceptions to the mandate. One of the challenges and maybe it's just providing clarity, is for if we have an employee who chooses not to apply for an exception, chooses not to get a vaccine, that is really putting us into a really difficult position. So, and that's why I'm kind of sensitive to kind of making any type of statements that says that no one for choosing not to do this is going to lose their employment with Yamhill County. I think one of the further challenges that I think would require some clarification or discussion on is there is a couple means for applying for exceptions to it, but how do we handle employees who choose not to get vaccinated and doesn't explore one of the exception that's available under the OARs. That's going to be, that could be a challenge, but I haven't seen anything that's leading me to believe that we're going to see any of those, but that's just some of the concerns that I have, that this is not an easy process to navigate, and the accommodation process and implementing and ensuring compliance with the OAR. I mean, it's not without its challenges. And so I just wanted to highlight that I do have some concerns about on how far reaching that ends up being and the potential implications.
Thank you, Ken. Commissioner Commissioner Kula. Got you guys mixed up.
It happens all the time. No, to be serious now, thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. And what I'm hearing is that there are some situations that potentially that have the potential to really strongly conflict with the statement about we guarantee your continued employment. And I typed out like a proposed alternative, Commissioner Bershauer, because I think that County Administrator makes a very good point that I think the intent of the letter was that people would work with this process. But if it's not in there, it seems like an important component. And so I typed out, if you have submitted an exemption statement and you are working in the interactive process, I think that's the word, we will continue to work with you. But Chair Starrett says no on that one.
No, that was just a sort of an involuntary thing I did, but you're right, I did. Go ahead. I didn't verbally say no. My head said no. Go ahead, Commissioner Bershauer. Thank you for that, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. I think the sentence you're referring to is, it says, we can assure you that while the process to navigate this new mandate is still being reviewed, Yamhill County will not end the employment of any employee based on their COVID-19 vaccination status. So I think, and this wording was pulled from what Marion County did, and I think their intent was to say there's a lot of confusion right now. Everything is sort of new and up in the air, but it's coming very fast. We want to reassure you that as we walk through this process, we're not going to get rid of you because you haven't received the vaccination, or maybe you haven't received it per, whatever schedule you've been mandated to receive it on. So I don't read that as, we're never going to fire you for anything, blah, 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 blah. I don't read it as that. I think it's a bit more specific that as we walk through and navigate this process, that we're not going to terminate employment, because at this point, it doesn't sound like the county has a specific set of guidelines for how we would mitigate an exemption. So, we haven't set those parameters either. So I think it's only fair to say, as we walk through this process, we're not gonna be terminating anyone for their vaccination status.
And I just wanted to clarify the reason that there's not a specific process, because it really gets down to individual positions and classifications on how we navigate that in each accommodation request. Unfortunately, I don't have a kind of a playbook, we really have to look at it on an individual basis, what the exception request is for. Just like in ADA, we have to, in similar circumstances, we really have to get down into the individual classification and what is available to accommodate those requests. And then also looking at, again, I keep saying we also fall back to what's a reasonable request. We have to make sure that, if they're unable to perform the essential functions of their position without making some accommodations, then we have to determine what those accommodations are to allow them to continue to perform the essential functions of their position. And then if we get to a point that there's not accommodations available, then we have to start thinking about, okay, what else, what other resources or what other means are available, and then that's when we start thinking about reassignment, or even eventually, there's potential even through an ADA that there might not be a reasonable accommodation available. And so then the question is, then what do we do with, with an employee who's in that situation? What options are available and how we have them moving forward?
That's the difficult part, is that very last sentence there is, we've gone through all of these, and I like Marion County's statement and what's in this letter is that we will not end the employment of anybody based on their vaccination status. But therein is that the crux of this is, are we going to go the extra mile to say to our employees, we value you enough that we are going to, in good faith, acknowledge that, or appreciate that you will work with us, knowing the difficult position we're in. And I'm hoping it never gets to that, but I still believe in the statement that this statement here is, we're not going to end the employment of any employee based on their COVID vaccination status. Christian?
At the risk of I don't want to make this sound the wrong way. So what if we were to say that that we won't end their employment based solely on their vaccination status?
Well, I guess my point is that in while the sheriff's on, so you have a deputy that works in the jail, and the jail has been deemed a medical facility or closely related. And the deputy's unvaccinated, so they've submitted an exemption, and now you're through the process. And the employee says, look, I will, every time I show up for work, I'm going to have my temperature. You can take my temperature. I'm going to go get random COVID tests to make sure I'm not positive. I'm going to wear PPE and 95 masks, right? And then the county says, well, no, you're not vaccinated, so we really can't just have you in here at all. So your option is you get placed on unpaid leave or something, right? I mean, that's unreasonable. There's reasonable accommodations, and then there's unreasonable. And I want to get to the point where we state as a board, we're not going to support unreasonable mitigating factors. Does that make sense?
Yes, but that's not what the statement here says. But county administrator was about to say something.
No, I was just going to say, a lot of the means that were being presented, those would be discussions that we're having, and those were everything that you kind of listed there as potential accommodations for the exception, have already been, cited as possible examples that are reasonable, so that would be part of that discussion that we'd be having. I think what we're really getting down to with the concerns about is, if we can't reach agreement on any of these items, these mitigations or these accommodations, is what do we do with, and maybe we might not have anyone that we actually get to that point, because again, we have a lot of accommodation that, measures that have been presented as possible, solutions to allowing someone to continue to report to work, and if it's when we get to, if we have a particular case or we're in a position to where, we've offered, the weekly testing, but that wasn't, we couldn't reach agreement on that, or we couldn't agree on the PPE, we couldn't agree on this, all this is part of the interactive process. And we're probably talking about a very, very limited or isolated circumstance that possibly you have an unsuccessful interactive process. But I will say, just based on my own personal experiences in the past in dealing with some ADA, there are times that you do work through an interactive process and there really is not a reasonable solution. And so at that point, it's where the employer and the employee have to essentially part ways to do this. And it's just something that the potential is there. But I do think that based on some of the OHA guidance that we have received, they've given us a pretty big list of possible ways to accommodate exception requests as they come in. And so hopefully we don't get to that point. So I just.
Yeah, and the thing is that there are no guarantees in anything. I think that I'm prepared, and I would like to think that this board is prepared to go out on a limb and to say that these people are valuable. You know, we talk about when it comes a time to, you know, increasing pay and all of the benefits and stuff. This is where the rubber meets the road as far as how much do we value them. And I am prepared to go out on a limb and say we're not going to fire anyone based on their vaccination status. I think that there is a broad, you know, array of ways we can mitigate it. I mean, all the way through the whole COVID thing, people have been wearing masks. People have been required to wear masks and social distance and all of that. So that's nothing new. It just is what we would continue to do. And as Commissioner Bershauer pointed out, just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean you don't get COVID and spread it. So how do we then point out to one person, you're not vaccinated, you wear this? And I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms. But anyway, Commissioner Kula.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And what my concern and my remaining and original concern and ongoing concern is that when you state to people that they will have employment at the county no matter what, there's no need to ever get into an accommodation process or an interactive process. No one will need to do that. None of the 10 people, for example, who've submitted, because you've told them you're good. And so that's my underlying foundational concern. And Commissioner Bershauer is shaking her head, so I'm sure she has thoughts on this. But I want to acknowledge that if you're saying you got it, then there's no need for an employee to work within the system to accommodate both them and the department.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Bershauer, response to that?
Thank you, Chair. That's not what I mean, and it's not anything that we've stated in this conversation. We acknowledge that we have this very horrific mandate that has come down, and we now have to operate within the parameters of it. And the parameters are that every employee who is affected has to either submit a proof of vaccination, or you have to submit an exemption / exception. And I want to make sure that our employees know that the safest bet for them is to submit an exemption. It's not only safer for them legally, but it's safer for us as well as the employer. And if you don't do one of those two things, you know, you are putting yourself sideways from the law and the mandate that we are following. We're not saying no to it at this point. But as you go through that process, we're not going to terminate your employment just because you have submitted an exemption by virtue of saying that you now can't work your own job or in the capacity that you've been working just because you're unvaccinated. So that's what that means. And I've never heard any of us say that we're not operating within the confines of the mandate. What I'm saying is that I want to make sure that those folks who work for us, who submit exemptions, feel like they are not going to be unfairly targeted or punished or anything simply for the sake of not receiving the COVID vaccination. And that's what this letter clearly states.
I just want to note that it doesn't talk about the observation or the possibility that county administrator has presented to us where somebody doesn't submit an exemption. And so I don't want to note that that right now your statement, the written statement is different than what you just stated. And I also want to say that what you just stated is follows rather what I have proposed as language. So I'm happy to have that language adopted if you want, and I could read it back to you if you would like.
You know, Commissioner Kula, I have not heard a single employee that is not willing to work in the system to keep their job. I think a lot of people right now are just terrified of losing it. And, you know, even the folks who have submitted exemptions are still terrified of losing their position. So I have not heard resistance from any county employee, that they are not willing to either submit their vax card or go through the process. They just don't want to be unfairly treated for doing so. So if that comes up, you know what, we can handle it. I'm willing to personally meet with that person. But what I'm saying is, I think people are feeling a level of desperation right now where they feel like they're going to be either terminated or unfairly treated at work because they're doing this process. And I'm saying that's wrong. And that's why we need to, or I would like us to approve this email to them stating very clearly that we support their medical freedom, the right to choose, and we also support them as employees.
The
So with-
statement, sorry, Commissioner, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I wanted to move approval of item I6, but I would also like to read it just for clarity, since we've been talking about this for over an hour.
Okay, I just want to make one comment here is the statement that says we support your right to an exemption and no employee should be coerced, bullied, or treated unfairly for submitting a medical or religious exemption. So Commissioner Kula, I think what that does, it speaks to my comment saying we're not going to terminate anybody. It's saying here very clearly that you have the right to submit that. And so by doing that you're not going to be terminated, if you do that. So
Yes, and I just want to note that nothing in this acknowledges that somebody might not submit an exemption, and nothing in this acknowledges, because this isn't a policy that's been worked through, it's a statement. And so it doesn't also include a statement like you have to submit an exemption if you are unvaccinated in order to retain your job. It doesn't say that, and so I want to acknowledge that it doesn't say that right now. It just assumes that people are going to go through the exemption process. Is that correct? So if nobody, oh, sorry, just to clarify, if somebody doesn't submit a request through the exemption process, remains unvaccinated, and is in a situation where they're required to be vaccinated, what happens then?
I'm sorry, I can't hear. A truck just went by, so I lost the last few sentences, but Commissioner Bershauer, you were responding to that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Kulu, we are operating under a new mandate that states that we have to have either proof of vaccination or an exemption. That's a given, and I think employees have been made aware that that is a given, that there's no option C, right? I mean, we have to do that at least. So, in my opinion, if that's a problem and somebody doesn't want to do it, that's kind of another separate conversation, because that is the law and it's what we're operating. And this, in my opinion, falls underneath that.
Oh,
Okay,
I see. So you're saying that this is not, you're assuming by virtue of this statement that you're proposing to us that nobody will do anything outside of either submit an exemption or submit their proof of their vaccination.
Well, I haven't heard that we've had a problem with that. Maybe Ken can address that, but if people are flat out refusing to submit an exemption or a vaccine proof of vaccination, then, I mean, I don't know what to say.
That was an example that was given by Ken.
We won't have any statistics on that. I don't know. I mean, because that would be based on if an employee who's in that position has voiced that position to a manager or supervisor to HR. I don't. But ultimately, that would come, once we're closer to the deadline and we're doing an assessment on we think all these employees are subject to the mandate. We've gotten this many vaccination cards, this many exception requests, and then we start narrowing, and then we find out, after that filter, if we have anyone who hasn't done either. So we wouldn't know that until we're further along in the process than we are right now.
I think anybody who's been in HR, and I know that our administrator has, knows that you can't possibly plan for every inevitability or every human condition or every possible scenario. So I think we go with what we have before us. So I believe Commissioner Bershauer, you called the question. Would you like to make a motion?
I think I did make a motion to approve I6. I was just saying I should read it for clarity.
Go ahead. We have a motion. We have a motion. And before Commissioner Bershauer reads it, further discussion.
Yes, I was going to say something, but I think that Commissioner Bershauer wanted to.
Well, Commissioner Kula, I acknowledge that that's a possibility, but I guess my question and response is, if we have an employee that's been fully vaccinated and they have proof of vaccination and they just happen to not get their card in until October 20th, 2 days late, are we going to fire that person? I mean, no, we're not going to fire the person. So yes, it's a possibility, but just like we're working with folks who are going through the exemption process, I would assume that we're going to work with these folks. And I would not be supportive of terminating employment for someone who waited 2 days over the deadline to submit their vax card. I mean, that was not my hypothetical for you was a vaccinated person. My hypothetical for you and what Ken described to us is a scenario where somebody is refusing to go through the process, so we don't even know about them, and is not vaccinated, because right now the statement says that nobody will be terminated from the employment of the county based upon their COVID vaccination status. I think it's very important for employees to go through that interactive process. And right now, this is not what this statement talks about. But it is, and it's a very small percentage of our employees that are not vaccinated. AFSCME kind of self-reported that they have about 18% of their workforce that isn't. That might be lower now. And some of the other unions, it might only be one other union, the numbers of people that have self-reported that they're not vaccinated is very small. And frankly, those are the folks that we've been talking to over the past 2 weeks. They are very aware of what is required of them. They're also terrified of losing their jobs. I just don't think we're going to be in a position where they're going to say, you know what, I'm scared of losing my job, but I'm going to throw my hands up and not go through this process. I've not heard that. So I'm
and I have not either. I understand, but I'm saying that is that's left out of your statement. And since this is a statement that people are going to hold up to county administrator and county council, I just think that it should be accurate and reflect that. That I think that your intent is that people go through the exemption process, because you said there are only two options. Well, there's not an option. That's go through, submit your vaccination record, or go through the process.
Yeah, I hear you, but I just think we've made that clear to employees already. There's already been communication that there are, three options: medical exemption, religious exemption, or you submit proof of vaccination. So I don't think there's any ambiguity around that. What we're saying with this is that, we're not going to terminate your employment as we go through this process, but we're also not going to terminate you simply because you didn't receive a COVID-19 vaccination and you've submitted an exemption.
Christian?
So I think the summary statement that Commissioner Bershauer just made is spot on. And I think that what we've had this discussion, I think it's very clear from the discussion what the board's intent is with this statement. I think it's understood that there could be, we hope there won't be, but there could be situations where we have employees who choose not to engage in the interactive process, or to try to follow one of the two paths open to them. If we end up in that scenario, there's nothing to prevent the board to come back and discuss again and come out with a slightly different policy statement or direction as it relates to those employees. So while the statement remains broad, I think anyone looking back on what it is that the board intended this statement to do, it would be clearer to them that it was intended that employees would work in good faith with the county to engage in this interactive process. And if for whatever reason that process breaks down, or there's a decision not to engage in the process, well, then that could change the feelings and the policy position of the board in that specific instance. That may be the best we can do at the moment, accepting and recognizing that there may be some clarification or need to come back and revisit it if we find ourselves in that unfortunate situation down the road.
Thank you, Christian. So we have a motion on the table. Commissioner Bershauer, do you want to read that before we take a vote?
Yes, thank you. Okay, this is the email to all county employees from the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners. Dear Yamhill County employees, as you know, Governor Brown has released new rules mandating vaccinations for state employees and healthcare workers. We are aware that this news may cause concern for many of our employees. It is important that we provide information to help ease some of the fear surrounding this latest news from Governor Brown. COVID-19 has been a major focus for the board's office and the county for a year and a half, and it is something that we will continue to spend time and resources fighting. However, we cannot, in good conscience, compromise the rights of our employees to make their own healthcare decisions. This is a fundamental right and one we support. Likewise, the right not to be coerced into medical treatment by the government is also fundamental. If you are considering the vaccine, you can visit the Yamhill County website to find a location near you, and it lists the website. Our health department is working to offer booster shots this fall, as well as first doses to those who are interested. If you need access to a medical exemption form, please visit the website. If you need access to a religious exemption form, please visit the website. We support your right to an exemption, and no employee should be coerced, bullied, or treated unfairly for submitting a medical or religious exemption. We can assure you that while the process to navigate this new mandate is still being reviewed, Yamhill County will not end the employment of any employee based on their COVID-19 vaccination status. We take the health and safety of all of our employees seriously and will continue to do so. Finally, we would like to thank all of our employees who have worked tirelessly throughout the pandemic, serving the members of our community. Sincerely, and then the commissioners who vote in the affirmative would be signing it.
All right, we have a motion. We've had considerable discussion. All those in favor of approving this letter to county employees signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Let the record show Commissioners Bershauer and Starrett voted in the affirmative. Commissioner Kula voted in the negative. Thank you. The motion passes. On to item 7, which is consideration of approval of a letter to the Oregon Health Authority Director, Pat Allen, in response to the COVID-19 vaccine breakthrough cases. So I have asked that the board sign on this letter to Mr. Allen. And just a little backstory here. I've submitted over the last year and a half a number of questions, not only to OHA spokesperson, Dr. Dean Seidlinger, but to the governor and to Mr. Pat Allen regarding specific questions. A list of 13 questions to the governor in April regarding hospital capacity issues. I've received no response. I resubmitted letters and questions to Dean Seidlinger, Dr. Seidlinger, about nutritional guidance that we could be providing to people and some other options. And I've also submitted questions to Mr. Allen regarding some of the statements that he's made. One of them was on a call where all the commissioners there, I believe it was in December, where he made the statement that, to my question, that the COVID vaccines were FDA approved. And when I questioned him again, he stood by that statement. This was in December. So I've got a number of various citations, which are all from OHA, and it has to do with some of the statements that have been made and some of the statistics that show that as to what Commissioner Bershauer was saying, that COVID deaths in Oregon have been due to vaccine breakthrough. And so we've not gotten any of this information. Senator Dennis Linthicum has asked Freedom of Information Act for some information about PCR cycle thresholds, about breakthrough cases, about a variety of different things. And he received a response saying that there was no responsive data to that, which we know isn't true because it's on their website. So what I would like to do, and you've had the opportunity to read this letter to Mr. Allen, is to ask for some clarification and some information regarding the OHA data that I have cited here. And basically, the first paragraph of this says, "Dear Mr. Allen, for the past year and a half, there have been concerns about the information you have shared as the director of the Oregon Health Authority, including your statement during a meeting of county commissioners last year that the COVID vaccines were FDA approved. When challenged, you stood by that statement. What is concerning is the questionable information that continues." One of the things he said in a letter on September 3rd was infected persons can shed large quantities of the virus for 2 days before symptoms appear. Persons without symptoms are estimated to account for 50% of the transmissions. And so I asked him to provide that empirical evidence because it's not been published by OHA. And I also asked him to review the data cited and the conclusions using OHA's own data. So anyhow, I'm just asking the board to sign on to that letter. And I think we've had a chance to look at it and certainly talk about this. So I would make a motion to approve the letter to Pat Allen. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Kula.
It was mostly a tie. I just want to say that I don't believe it's a true statement that the vaccines are unsafe and ineffective. So while I think it's important to point out many of the questions and many of the statements in this, it's also not true that the vaccines are unsafe and ineffective. So
Okay,
thank you for that. And Commissioner Burschauer.
So you're saying the vaccines, you're making the statement that the vaccines are the absolute are safe and are effective.
I'm saying that the vaccines, all evidence points to the vaccines being safe and effective. And I realize that you don't agree with that statement, but I do agree with that statement.
Oh, I was just looking at the OHA data that said 47.3% of the August COVID deaths, or at the very least 24% were due to vaccine breakthrough. So I don't know how you could consider that effective. But in any event, we could argue that.
We can totally do, if you want to go over it, I'm happy to, but Commissioner Burschauer is a statement.
No, I was just wondering if you could address that specific OHA's data.
Yes, so you made up a number that was the 47%. The 24% would be the actual numbers based upon the information that's you presented. But we can go on, Chair. Your statements are factually incorrect. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to hear what Commissioner Burschauer has to say.
Yeah, my statements are not factually correct because all I'm using is OHA data, but Commissioner Burschauer.
And I would say that you added the 47%. You created a data point that didn't exist, and it says it in the statement that you have submitted to us.
I didn't create a data point that doesn't exist. Anyway, go ahead, Commissioner Burschauer.
Thank you, Chair. So for those watching who haven't read this, it is a letter to the director of OHA that is asking for clarification as to what their own numbers truly mean. And the number, the 24%, is the OHA data that states that the number of deaths that we had in the month of August, 24%, a fourth of them were of people who are considered fully vaccinated. The question is, does that number include seniors who live in assisted living facilities who have unfortunately passed away during the month of August that were presumably fully vaccinated because they were among the first people to receive the vaccine? If you remember, when it first rolled out, we prioritized them. So if the OHA data that is specific to seniors and assisted living centers is not included in that number, then it is 47% of the deaths that we saw in the month of August were fully vaccinated people. And that is so shocking. I think 24% is shocking, but 47% is even more shocking. And the whole point is to get clarification because it does impact how we respond to these variants as they come up. Obviously, the vaccine is not the be all and the end all. It's not the cure all. So how about we start adjusting our policies to make sure that we are focusing on early intervention and keeping people out of the hospital and keeping them from getting to the point where they're there and they're on a pretty bad path and they die from this. The concern, and I've expressed this to Director Manfred for quite some time now, is that we're almost giving people a sense of false security because we're saying that the vaccine, you just get the vaccine and you'll be fine. And that's not actually what the numbers are proving out. So for me, this letter is necessary to get some clarification from Director Allen to say, how bad is this? Is it 25% vaccine failure that we're looking at? And who is that? Are they seniors? Are they people that are immunocompromised? Is there some sort of trend there that we need to be aware of? Or is it upwards of 50%? So that's the clarification there. And I am in support of sending this in.
And I just want to clarify, Commissioner Bershauer, because I appreciate your comments, that what the letter says is, right now what it says is, with this being not safe and not effective, a new solution this should be terminated and a new solution needs to be implemented. So it literally says, stop doing vaccinations and promoting vaccinations. Like, that's what the letter says that you're in support of sending. It does couch it in, we want to hear more information about this, but the second to last statement says that. And so if you want to support a statement that says, stop doing vaccinations and stop supporting vaccinations, you are within your right. But I don't think that's a good idea for both public health and for just individuals.
Well, what I'm pointing out using OHA's own data, that in terms of what is good for public health, that this has been a massive failure, that this has been an absolute public health debacle. When you see that many people who have died and that many people who've been vaccinated, so much for the panacea that everything was going to be fine if everybody was vaccinated. And but in any event, I'm looking for
So, Chair, I would also like to note that right now we're between 85 and 95% of people who are hospitalized for COVID are not vaccinated. So I'm just thinking, like, what if we would have hospitals even more overwhelmed if we immediately did away, or if we had never done the vaccination program. So I recognize your value. You think it's important to end vaccinations, because you've stated it here in your letter. I'm not in support of that statement.
Okay, and so if we want to talk about the number of unvaccinated people who are being hospitalized, that's a whole nother discussion, because what we're finding is that there are in fact vaccinated people who are being hospitalized, but that's a whole nother discussion. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, Commissioner Kula, I was pulling it up because I was not aware of specific language in there. I was focused on the data. Can you point out, now that I have it up, can you point out the language that you have an issue with?
You'd think I'd know how to unmute after all these years. So it's the second to last paragraph in the statement. And you're welcome to read it aloud if you would like.
I'll read it. It says, with a single solution that is neither safe nor effective based on the empirical evidence, the program must be terminated, and new solutions like aggressive nutritional prevention, hygiene, and early treatment with integrative allopathic and complementary health approaches, which is something OHA has been absolutely loath to do. And so I'm asking for prompt responses to these questions, because we're seeing that so many people who have been vaccinated are being have been hospitalized and have died, and the data is here. So, Commissioner Bershauer.
Oh, Chair, you don't want to go into hospitalizations, because we were going to talk about that as a separate thing, right?
Yeah, we can talk about hospitalizations all day long, but what I'm proving to you here is that when you see the number of people in assisted living who have been vaccinated, presumably, since that was such a high level of vaccination importance, and then you add those to the numbers, it is quite clear that we are looking at upwards of 47% breakthrough. And
I apologize, Commissioner Bershauer, I interrupted you. Forgive me.
So I'm not going to make assumptions, but I'm going to clarify. When you say the program must be terminated, are we talking of what are we talking about specifically?
Well, what I'm saying is that when you mandate something, okay, and when you talk about the mandate, which is what we're looking at, is vaccine mandates, not saying don't make vaccines available, but when you mandate them, and then this becomes what we're looking at in terms of the numbers, this is very clear that a program that was supposed to have one net result is not having that result.
And Chair, I
Okay.
just want to note that there's nothing in here about vaccine mandates. I don't see any word. Do you see it in there? Is mandate used anywhere in this document?
Well, so I guess my question would be, Chair, would you be amenable to changing the word program to say mandate? So the mandates must be terminated. Because what I gather is you're saying a single solution, whether it's all vaccines or it's all monoclonal therapy or whatever, a single solution is not safe. It's not a safe strategy, nor is it effective based on empirical evidence. So the mandates must be terminated with new solutions, like, et cetera. Does that make
I
more
could change it to mandate, but remember that the program that we've seen, which has been rolled out by OHA and which has been pushed in every public health department in the state, has to do with simply being the one size fits all, and that is the vaccine. We know that there are other modalities. We know that even other states that are addressing using monoclonal antibody therapy, we have it available here, but it's just sort of this well-kept secret. So the program, when it's sort of one size fits all, we're only going to push vaccines, but we're not letting people know the breadth of other types of treatments. That's what I mean by the program. Not saying we need to stop vaccinating people if they choose to get vaccinated, but the program has just been this all-encompassing, the end goal being vaccination for everybody, when we're not looking at there are other options available that are very effective.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we can massage that language a little bit to be a little more clear, because I'm not anti-vaccine. I haven't been this whole time. If people want to choose to get it, that's their choice. My concern, my overarching concern with all of this is that if the data is telling us that we have an issue with vaccines, we have an obligation to inform our constituents that it is not the cure-all. And we need to be looking at how to inform them to protect themselves. So, if you want
masks, right?
if
We could add that to it.
If we want to change the language a little bit, I'd be fine doing that. But above all, I absolutely would like to have clarification on this empirical data, because it's coming from OHA, and yet the summaries of the data are quite shocking. So having some clarification there is absolutely critical.
So I could, I don't have a problem massaging the language in that to make it a little bit clearer, because again, in using OHA's own data, these are all their numbers. So yeah, and I think the whole point being that we have this whole one single solution, and there are other states that are using a more comprehensive approach, and I'd like to see Oregon start to do that as well. So we could change the wording.
So are you wanting to say then that mandatory vaccination programs, or because right now it really refers to, it says this is safe and ineffective, therefore we should eliminate it, or this program. I'm not sure how you can say that a mandatory vaccinations should be eliminated, but everybody else should be free to do what they like if something's unsafe and ineffective, which is what it says right now.
No, what I'm saying is that we've done this has sort of been the single approach to dealing with COVID, single approach instead of looking at the other options that are available. For instance, monoclonal antibody therapy is effective and it is being used. And yet that's something that just is pretty late to the game that we're letting people know about that. So the program itself has been focused on one approach.
Right, and I know that monoclonal antibodies, until just recently, the FDA, I think, was approved them for a single injection rather than that 4-hour infusion. And I know that the OHA,
right,
that the OHA and our local public health authority have been promoting and letting people know that that's now available, because it wasn't available outside of very particular settings, and it wasn't as a result available to lots of people.
Right. The thing is that if you give somebody a 4-hour IV treatment, now, of course, it's easier because it's available subcutaneously, but it also is perhaps a little bit more effective than putting them in the hospital on a ventilator in an ICU bed. But in terms of what I'm saying here is that the data is showing that this is not necessarily going to be the way for us to address this one size fits all. And so when I say that the program needs to be stopped, it's because we need to include other things in a program, not what we've been doing. So
would you encourage putting masks on that list, or restrictions on businesses or gathering sizes, which have been shown to be effective?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with that. And the whole masks, if you want to talk about mask studies, we're asking Dr. Dean Seidlinger, which I asked him for, just where's the data on that randomized control studies, which should be fairly easy. It's the gold standard of scientific testing. And he said there is no such thing.
And we could talk about the one from Bangladesh, which showed that good masks, so N95, KN95, are effective. But I was actually specifically talking about a study that was a meta-analysis of non-pharmaceutical interventions globally over the past 18 months that have shown that the biggest effect, and they found that masks were something that just kind of muddied the waters, but that the biggest effect was reducing gathering sizes. So if you want to put that in there as the best thing, then that would be a good thing. It would also be honest, right?
Yeah, and I want to go back to what perhaps Dr. Fauci said about masks. If we could talk about masks, we could also talk about the Danish mask study, and we could also talk about the variety of medical professionals who've talked about how actually it's worse to put a damp piece of cloth on your face all day, breathe into it, and touch it all day and expect that somehow you're not going to have deleterious health effects. So I think we can argue about the efficacy of masks if you'd like to, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying here is that we're asking for some clarification, and we're citing data to Mr. Allen, and I would just like the board to sign on to it. And Commissioner Berschauer, you had a suggestion on how you would rather see the language massaged in order to make that something you would agree to.
Yes, Chair. I mean, the focus for me on this letter is to get data, because as you have been asking for data, so have I. I've been asking, where's the OHA testing reinfection rates? Do we know, what percentage of people who have had COVID and whether they're vaccinated or not are getting COVID again? And there's just nothing. So I think it's absolutely imperative that we keep pounding away for and demanding more data. It matters in real time, because our job is to help keep people safe. And if more and more folks are arriving to our hospitals that have been fully vaccinated, or as this data shows, a quarter of our deaths were fully vaccinated people, we need to be much broader about our message in terms of how to keep people safe and out of the hospital, and what to do if they do get COVID and they are symptomatic. What is that immediate intervention in the first week that's going to help pull them out of it? Because there's a lot that's out there that's available. So for me, the focus of this letter really is the data. I don't know if you have a suggestion on how to retool that second to last paragraph. Maybe we just eliminate it altogether. Commissioner Kuhl, I don't think that you're against getting data. It doesn't sound like it. So I'd love to have it be a unanimous decision here to send this in and simply demand that they provide it.
Well, okay, then I think if we were to take out, so the sentence would read, with a single solution that is neither safe nor effective based on empirical evidence, where it says the program must be terminated and new solutions. So if we take out with a single solution, and we'll go ahead and just make it simple by saying new solutions like aggressive nutritional prevention, hygiene, and early treatment with integrative health approaches. So that we're basically saying with a single solution and new solutions that include nutritional prevention. So we're just basically saying that these are the modalities that we would hope would be included in the program. Commissioner Kula?
I just wanted to note that the previous paragraph then too should probably either be amended or changed or cut out, which goes on to suggest that the vaccines are not safe. So it's the previous paragraph as well, if there's elimination of statements that are not true.
Okay, so the paragraph that says, when this is coupled with the fact that at least 63 Oregonians have died post-inoculation? Is that?
Sorry, I had to flip back and forth.
Okay.
Yes, that's the statement. So if you're going to eliminate one, it probably to be clear throughout, logically coherent, you should probably eliminate that one as well.
Yeah, when the standard is in a clinical trial, when there is a death, that typically the trial has been ended, and this has happened in every. You can even go back to SARS before COVID. But yeah, we have seen 63 that have died post-inoculation, and that standard is not being applied here. So I'm all in favor of keeping that in. And then we would, in the second to last paragraph, with a single solution that is neither, we'll put in the word, completely safe and completely effective based on empirical evidence, the program should include aggressive nutritional prevention, hygiene, and early treatment with integrative health approaches.
So Chair, I just want to acknowledge that that the previous paragraph, so the third one still says this is not safe.
Okay. Correct. Commissioner Berschauer? Thoughts?
Chair, I mean, I think I know what Commissioner Kuhl is saying, but to me, it's more of a statement of, you know, how can you state that something is effective if we're seeing a 47.3% failure rate? I mean, with anything else, you wouldn't say it's effective. You might say it's an option, but it's not effective. So to me, that's not as offensive because the fact is that we have seen, I think 63 deaths was in the month of August. I don't think that's cumulative. So, you know, it's impossible to assert that these experimental inoculations still in clinical trial are safe. You know, that's a judgment statement. I don't disagree if that's in fact the data that we're seeing. So, you know, and I support your change, your edit to the second to last paragraph.
So
Okay.
Commissioner Berschauer, to be clear, you don't think that the vaccines are safe? Is that what because signing this will have you on the record as saying that. But you've repeatedly said that they are safe and effective in the past.
I haven't said that they're safe and effective. I've said that I support someone's right to choose to have them. I have explicitly talked about the risks with the vaccines, predominantly the myocarditis that we were seeing with young men. So I've always said that people should do their homework and exercise caution.
But didn't you just say that you asked Chair Starrett to eliminate that statement in the second to last paragraph?
No, the issue that you brought up was that the program must be terminated. That I think it needed to be more clear, because obviously we're not going to terminate the vaccine programs. What I think the intent is that we want to say a one-size-fits-all approach is not healthy, and it apparently isn't working very well. And we would like some response as to our concerns, and we want you to back up the data and show us the data. Now, again, this is data that is not just being pulled out of thin air. This is data that's coming from their own website. So, you know, I think the statement above the paragraph that says when this is coupled with the fact that 63 Oregonians have died fully vaccinated, and that the standard for terminating clinical trials is one death, it's impossible to assert that these experimental inoculations are safe. You know, that may not be a judgment call that OHA is tasked with making. But certainly, if that's the standard for clinical trials, then we've got a problem. So I don't have an issue with that. But I had an issue with saying that we should terminate the vaccine program. I think that, and again, every option needs to be on the table, and the focus, in my opinion, needs to shift dramatically and very rapidly to early intervention, because early intervention is what is keeping people out of the hospital. As we've seen, and these numbers show, that the vaccine is not the be all and the end all. You know, these folks are the folks that initially got the vaccine when they first came out, and now we're seeing that they're waning, and we need booster shots, so we need a third shot. And so this is going to continue to happen if we continue to see variants. And my focus is keeping people out of the hospitals and to a point where they're going to survive and get through it, not just feel like they have a false sense of security. And OHA has an obligation. They're a taxpayer-funded organization. They have an obligation to give us the facts that we ask for.
And then, if I might, Commissioner Bershauer, I just want to note that the thing that's keeping people out of the hospital is the vaccine. So if 85 to 95% of the people who are in the hospital or who are hospitalized or have to be hospitalized are unvaccinated, that leaves 5 to 15% of the people who are hospitalized. That represents prevention of severe COVID. I just want to, like, we can acknowledge that, hopefully, and you can still have your other statements as correct. But I do want to say that if you personally do not believe that the vaccine is safe and effective, I don't think you should be encouraging other people to take it either. And I don't think it would have been good for you. I don't know your status, but it seems like an inconsistency there.
I support people's right to choose. I always have. And we are seeing cases of people, like that young woman, 35 years old in Portland, who was fully vaccinated and died from COVID. And obviously cases of people who are unvaccinated who are dying from COVID. The common denominator, and I've discussed this with Director Manfred, the common denominator is there is a lack of early intervention. People are coming to the hospital saying they can't breathe, and they're being sent home because they're not sick enough. That is when intervention needs to immediately happen, and it doesn't matter vaccination status. We're seeing it with both. So again, I go back to the letter. I want the data, because the data tells the story, unemotional, you know, regardless of political status or whatever. It tells a story, and it should inform how we're going to proceed with our countywide health strategy, and informing people and telling them how they can keep themselves safe, whether they're vaccinated or not. It doesn't matter.
You know, the thing I've been asking for all along is that we include the importance of virtually everyone who goes into the hospital with a COVID diagnosis has a vitamin D deficiency. You go to countries like Korea, very first thing they do when a COVID patient comes in is they do a subcutaneous, immediately give them 100,000 IUs of vitamin D right off the bat, because that is one of the singular easiest and most effective ways to mitigate this. But we're not even mentioning that at all. We're not mentioning some of the other nutritional supports that are there. And what I'm saying is we need to include that. So when I say that this program, the one-size-fits-all program, isn't working and it's not effective, is because we're still seeing people get COVID who've been inoculated. So what I'm saying is this one-size-fits-all thing, we need to start looking at this and asking for data. So if it would be clearer and if it would be more palatable to change the wording in the second to the last paragraph to say that the one-size-fits-all program must be terminated, or once we could take that out and just say new solutions need to be addressed. So, I mean, if you want to take out that the program needs to be terminated, then we can go ahead and just make it clear that we're asking for new solutions to be included in whatever type of COVID mitigation program we're going to get behind as a state. So I'm going to call the question and ask for the approval of this letter to the to the Director of OHA, Pat Allen, and that is agenda item I7. So with the changes, with the amended changes, make a motion to approve. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Record show Commissioners Bershauer and Sterrett voted in the affirmative. Commissioner Kula voted in the negative. And we will move on to our next agenda item, which is public hearings. We have none, but we do have
Chair.
some significant announcements in.
Chair, remember, the one item was pulled off the consent.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Yes, we did pull that off. And
So
we
that
still
would
have-
be now H8.
Okay, and we have ARPA under announcements. So what I'm going to suggest is that maybe we take a 5-minute break and then come back and we'll do I8. And that is the agenda item that was taken out of the consent agenda. And then we'll do announcements and ARPA. Thank you.
Sounds good, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, we are back. We are rejoining the September 9th, 2021 formal informal session at the point of what was item G1 in the consent agenda is now at item G8. And we're talking about the approval of a contract employee agreement between Yamhill County and Timothy S. Todd Sadlow for special counsel services at the rate of $150 per hour, retroactive to September 1st, 2021, with annual auto renewal. Commissioner Bershauer, you asked that this be removed from the consent agenda. Thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this particular item has generated quite a bit of public testimony, namely from folks who have experience with Mr. Sadlow, particularly in relation to the Yamhill West Sider Trail. They feel that his decisions on behalf of the county were reckless, and so much so that they filed a bar complaint against Mr. Sadlow, and we were made aware of that, I don't remember when, maybe a month ago. What I wasn't aware of and what came through in public testimony is that the bar is actually investigating this complaint. So my concern is that we have a group of constituents that have come forward and they are expressing that the county should no longer employ this individual based on past decisions and based on the status of the bar investigation. So I think it's something that we need to talk about. That's why I pulled it out of the consent agenda. I'm also aware of the county's position. I'm aware of the fact that we have immediate needs, legal needs that Mr. Sadlow was addressing. So I'm aware that this is going to cause an issue if we do not agree to extend the contract. So just wanted to get my colleagues' thoughts and then maybe see where we can come to an agreement potentially.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Kula, so your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that Councilor Sadlow is a very experienced land use council, and I think that we need to have an experienced land use council on staff until we can train a replacement here.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I see that again, once again, this rock and a hard place type of thing. I know that Councilor Sadlow has significant experience in land use matters. I know that there are concerns about some of the decisions made, which led to some issues with the trail, with remands, with attorney's fees having to be paid back, those types of things. I don't think that it serves anybody's purpose for us to sit here and without Mr. Sadlow being able to defend himself and to talk about basically a personnel issue in this forum. What my recommendation would be is that there are concerns. Mr. Sadlow does have experience. The county does need land use and some of the other items that he addresses. He does work on a variety of other legal issues for the county. And so I don't want to leave the county in, it's already very constricted in terms of what staff can do. There's just way more than staff can do at any given time. This would further put some constraints on that. So I don't want to leave county counsel's office in a lurch. I also do want to acknowledge that there are these concerns and we don't have a determination from the Oregon bar. That being said, I would like to say that at this particular juncture, I would suggest a 60 or 90-day extension so that we can continue this, so the county counsel's office can, because Mr. Sadlow had made it clear he wanted to retire and was kind enough to say, I'll go ahead and stick around and offer my services while you find a replacement. So while we're doing that, I don't want to leave us in the lurch. I also don't want to make make this one of these because this is an annual auto renewal. And I think that might be too long a time period. So there are other options, and other counties use contract land use, or they do a contract for a lawyer who deals specifically with contracts. We know that's been really hard for us to get those done because of the time constraints. So I'm going to say a 90 days will give us some time to look at our options and also to be able to rely on Mr. Sadlow for what he has been doing for the county.
Yeah, and Chair, do you want to make a motion? It's 90-day with a consideration of renewal as your proposal.
I'm going to say 90 days. Commissioner Bershauer?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned 60 or 90. I would be more comfortable with 60 because, you know, this particular issue is not one that I feel that we're just, you know, pulling out of the closet. That's a private personnel issue. This has been very publicized that the Yamhill West Sider Trail had all of these issues, and this is what's come out of it. You know, the bar, if they're investigating, as per the letter that came through in public testimony, it seems like they will be indicating one way or the other in the next month or so. So, you know, I'm sensitive to the fact that if we were just going to go out and hire an attorney, we probably wouldn't be quick to hire one that was under investigation or that had had previous, you know, significant disciplinary action against them. So my hesitation is that I would like to see more of what comes out of this investigation. I certainly feel that a year-long contract is too long, certainly not auto-renewing, but I understand that the county is in a spot where we absolutely need help. So I would be willing to support a 60-day contract.
But the terms of the contract, correct me if I'm wrong, Christian, say that 15 days that either party can change the duration, can basically.
Either side can terminate on 15 days notice.
Okay. So that's why I'm saying we've got, if we give it 90 days now, we can do a 15-day termination if we do get, let's say we get something from the bar that is egregious. It still doesn't change the fact that unfortunately we're in a position in county counsel's office where we do need the help. So while this is unfortunate, I want to acknowledge that then it puts some difficult pressure on county counsel's office, and they're being punished. So I don't want to do that. So that's why I'm saying with the 90 days, it gives us time to find somebody who is qualified, or find a contract lawyer who'll do this. And then that's not going to be a quick turnaround by the time you do a recruitment and the time you do interviews and hire somebody. It's going to take all of 2 to 3 months. That brings us up to the end of the year. And yet we could terminate in 15 days, just like Mr. Sadlow could terminate in 15 days. So it really does, this is a 15-day contract with a 90-day window.
And Chair, I appreciate that.
Chair, thank you. I appreciate that explanation, and that makes sense to me. So I'd be in support of that.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion that we approve the contract employee agreement between Yamhill County and Mr. Sadlow for special counsel services at the rate of $150 an hour, retroactive to September 1st, 2021, with a 90-day termination. And or what is the correct terminology, Christian? Would that be 90-day?
Yeah, 90-day term. And then at some point, if the board chooses to revisit it at that point, if we're not quite ready and the board is comfortable to extend it for an additional point of time, or if there's something that happens in the interim, the board wants to revisit it, we can certainly address it at that time as well.
Okay, well, I appreciate everybody working,
Yeah.
you know.
And I just want to say, I do appreciate the sensitivity of this, and I appreciate the board support, because this will be significant help for our office.
Okay, so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes. So that brings us up to item K, which is the ARPA funds. And we have been trying to figure out how we're going to spend this windfall. And I know that Our administrator has been spending lots of time figuring that out. So Ken, thank you.
Yeah, so I think this will be, and a pretty quick discussion. And I have a proposal as for having a more in-depth discussion on several of the areas. First off, I want to apologize that some of the delays with being able to come back in a more timely fashion. But as you know, I've been out of the office unexpectedly for a period of time, and that's contributed to the delays and where I'm at with this. So right now, we have a couple things in motion. One, Avishah from SEDCOR has reached out to EDAC to, Commissioner Bershauer had a question.
I'm sorry, Ken, I don't want to interrupt, but I got a message from someone who's trying to listen to the ARPA thing and they said they can't hear anything. So I don't know if we want to double check our audio on our feed. Is that a Carrie question? They said everything from before the break was fine, and then when we came back after 5 minutes, there was nothing.
Chair, can you hear us?
I'm not sure what technical issues the individual may be having, but Carrie just confirmed that she also has the YouTube feed also running, and the audio is coming through on the YouTube feed. And I'm not sure in particular if it's somebody having technical issues with their PC but it sounds like we're able to, you're hearing me, everybody on the panel,
Yeah.
hearing okay.
Okay, just wanted to double check. Sorry about that.
Okay. Avishah and EDAC.
Thank you. So, based on the work session that we had, the discussions that we had back in August, was it August or late July? I have a hard time with tracking days of the week. So I did follow up with Avishah. She's reached out to EDAC to, based on the discussion that the board had and those guardrails, and really trying to here's the parameters that we would like to get feedback from EDAC. And so Avishah is working on that right now. So that one, it's going to depend on how quickly they convene their meeting and provide some recommendations as the timing and when those recommendations will come back before the board for discussion. The other items that I've looked at in talking to staff, we're working on proposals for essentially what a framework or a recommendation might look like around the child care, the water and sewer infrastructure, and the nonprofit categories. And what I'd like to do is schedule a work session on September 23rd that we would bring the recommendations for those three categories and present it to the board. I asked for the 23rd because I want to have some time. I think we could have things ready to at least have them in the packet by the 17th. So that way it's in the packet and ready for discussion on the 23rd.
So Ken, just to be clear, you're saying that what we would do is that we would take those categories, childcare, water, and the nonprofits, which come under economic impacts.
Correct.
And then we would address those in terms of coming up with more of a hard number.
Well, it's not necessarily getting into the numbers. This is, the direction that I had from the board was to come up with a solicitation process on a formalized process on how we would consider and collect formal proposals that fit the guardrails based on, the discussions that we would have on the 23rd, to then keep a formalized process rolling forward. And actually have something more defined that then we would plug dates and start doing announcements and then start driving that selection and award process later down the road.
And that's something that EDAC would have some guidance around.
Well, they're really focused on that impacted industries portion of the economic portion of the overall thing. They all kind of fall under that economic impact category, but based on the last discussions, the board, really wanted EDAC to focus on that impacted industries area. And so then that's where EDAC and SEDCOR is going to be focusing their energy. And then the ones around childcare, the water and sewer infrastructure, and the nonprofits is what staff's doing.
Okay, great.
And working on those areas of that. It's all under the economic development or economic impact, which is where we saw a majority of the requests all fall under that category. Except for water and sewer. Water and sewer it's its own category, but that one should be relatively simple based on the discussion that we had last time on what that process is going to look like.
So a question about the water and sewer infrastructure, that would be an application process as well, not simply what they've submitted so far.
Yes, that's what we're going to come back with. Because I want to have, I think it'll help us for both treasury reporting, tracking, how the funds are spent, ensuring equity, prioritization, all the above, is to have that formalized process that really outlines it. And so we're working on that. I think that one is going to be a relatively easy program to put together. So that's why I think we'll have some proposals and recommendations that we can bring forward on the 23rd and flush out in more detail on each category.
Sounds good. Thank you. Commissioners?
Yep. Oh, I'm just happy to see this moving forward. Thank you. Sorry, Chair. I think it'll be good to have a formal, second look for the water and sewer, because as some of these districts, these municipalities look through their own and decide here's how I'm going to spend my money. Then the money that's allocated to them, it's kind of winnowing down or distilling down those projects. And then one came up in Amity recently that's a little bit more time sensitive. So I think they'll probably propose that to us.
Right, and we've got Yamhill as well. So those are top of the list priority because those are critical needs. So Commissioner Bershauer?
Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner Kula, I was going to bring up Amity because we did say in previous meetings that if something was urgent, we wanted to hear it immediately. I don't know how urgent that is. It sounds like it's more of a, miscalculation perhaps on what it was really going to cost to finish that. But I know it is critical for their water lines. Do you have any indication as to, is it okay if they submit it in this process, or do we need to consider something sooner?
Yeah, the last conversation I had with Mayor King, who is now Mayor King, it sounded like the ODOT is sending out to bid the first of the year for the Salt Creek Bridge replacement. And so the city just wants to make sure they're staying on the same course and the same timeline, so that when they get there, when it's time to move their water line, that they're not behind or ahead of and waiting for them. But what I will do, Commissioner Bershauer, is I will send the email that I got from Mike Thomas at the City of Amity to Ken to forward to all of you, so we can get a better sense of the level of urgency that was expressed to me.
Okay, I know he sent one to us, but it didn't have necessarily we need $600,000 by this date. So that's what I can follow up too, but I just wanted to put that out there that we did say we would elevate urgent concerns. So if it's something that they need to have the money by the end of September, clearly we need to consider that. So let's get some clarification around that maybe.
I will send him an email as soon as we're done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ken?
And I think that's going to be one of the challenges moving forward, because I do realize it seems like the request, because we still continue to receive requests. We're getting emails and asking, and I recognize that all of the requests that we've had, there is an urgent nature to every single one of them. And so the challenging part is, is having that process on how we vet that and determine the priorities and release the funds. Because if we run out the gate and award a project and we spend all the funds, and then another urgent request that then the board may deem is like, well, actually, if we would have known about this earlier, so that's where I think a solicitation process and having a formalized process will help kind of determine that and help shape how we handle requests moving forward. And then it also gives some clear guidance on where to direct these types of requests. So that was, I think, the big update that I had as far as ARPA requests going is really, we're working on it. And so I would like to schedule a work session for the 23rd to come in and present those recommendations and then get guidance from the board on that date.
And also just a reminder that the RFI for the broadband has gone out. And
Yes.
we have heard from people who are asking for an extension of that deadline because we
requested it.
Yes, it's been duly noted. So thank you for getting that out. We appreciate it.
Yeah, we did extend it just so the board's aware that we got a large number of questions from a couple of interested parties in the RFI, and due to the volume of questions and they were tough questions too, we weren't able to even adhere to our own deadline as far as when we would post responses to that. So we've extended the deadlines of both the getting the responses to the questions and to the eventual due date for the RFIs. So we put that out further because keeping in mind that our responses to those questions are going to help shape the RFI. Some of the challenges we have around an RFI is I think most people are accustomed to RFP. And so where an RFI is not intended to necessarily get into the specific project details. And so that's some of the struggles that we've had is a number of the questions are more framed around, what does actual implementation going to look like when we're just at this point trying to solicit information from broadband providers. So we've received a lot of great questions and we made those modifications. We sent out the notification. We also posted it on the website that we've extended the deadline for that.
Thank you for your work on that. We appreciate it. Commissioners, any other comments? Commissioner Bershauer.
Oh, Commissioner Chair Starrett, I was just going to ask if you have heard from Senator Boquist at all on the timing of the state funds.
Yeah, from what I've understood is the last thing was they were waiting for information that our two, Polk and Yamhill, were accepted, but in terms of when the funds would be dispersed, we're looking at with everybody else's is I don't know, probably they said anywhere from October on, but I think that's a bit premature.
Okay, thank you.
Which is good because we're not ready for them.
We'll be ready. I know we will.
If I may, Chair, unrelated to ARPA, there is another topic that I was hoping to talk to the board about getting on an agenda for either next week, which I believe is the 16th or the 23rd. ODOT has reached out to us again, asking for an update on the Connect Oregon grant and the bridge. And as you recall, that we had previous discussions about what repayment was going to look like. They've again asked for an update because I believe they presented us options, and the ball was in our court as far as the next step to, if we're treating this like bargaining, it's our turn to submit a proposal or a response or have a discussion. So I did respond to ODOT and advise that that I'd be talking to the board and would see about getting this as an agenda item. So just wanted to put that question out.
Was there any kind of information about what they're looking at as far as immediacy? Were they expecting it to be within a month, within weeks, within days?
I think it's pretty quickly, if I remember timelines correctly. I think the last response to the proposal that was provided to ODOT, it's been quite a while that they provided that, and we haven't we haven't provided a formal response or had further discussion about their last response. I want to say since June or early July, I believe might have been the last time that we had a discussion about that. And, there is some, immediacy to that, because I mean, as they've mentioned before, they do have options available if they feel like they have to withhold funds, for any type of repayment. I don't want Public Works or Transit, which are two programs that come to mind in particular that do get allocations from ODOT. I don't want their funding streams to somehow be in jeopardy pending discussion and a repayment plan associated to the Connect Oregon grant.
Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. So Ken, if we let them know that the commissioners are going to be discussing this on the 23rd, we don't anticipate that that's going to be an issue for them. Okay. Because we had talked a little bit about this on Tuesday, that I would really like to, for next week, I'd really like to address the bridge status, because I feel like we're bumping up against construction schedules and just the nature of construction in Oregon. Once you get into those winter months, it's not as nice to do. So if we could do something like that, where we bring up that next week, and then, we can talk about ODOT on the 23rd. I have a whole list of questions about the ODOT thing, so it'll give us some time to go through getting some answers to those questions too.
I would just quickly update on the bridge what we're really pending, because we got clear direction on the work or what we were going to ask Farline to do, and where we were at is we're in the process of drafting or finalizing an amendment to facilitate the work based on the direction from the board. And so that part, and I would have to, I need to talk to Carrie Martin and Christian about the status and where we're at on the amendment, if we actually have a draft that is ready for board consideration, or and we'd also have to send it to Farline to get their feedback on it too. And we want to make sure that they're agreeable to the amendment as well. So
Has there been any other communication with Farline between now and the last time we talked?
I think the last communications was just advising that we were working on the amendment.
Yeah, we have a draft, and if the board is interested in considering that, we can make that a priority and work with Farline as best we can to make sure that that is something that is on the agenda for discussion next week.
Right, let them see it first and make some.
Yeah, we have one from them, so they're sort of looking to us for any thoughts we had on the amendment. So once we provide that to them, hopefully we're very close. And so I think that is something that we can focus on and get added into the packet, assuming we can communicate with Farline in between now and tomorrow or Monday to address any questions that they might still have after our review.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that we need to put on our calendar? Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for the update. Commissioners, any other announcements?
I think Ken is frozen. Oh, I just want to make sure, because he was frozen on my screen when you made the question. You sent the question out of anything else.
I didn't have anything else that I was bringing forward for agenda items.
Thank you. Commissioner Bershauer?
I just wanted to clarify, Chair, about the email that's going to go out that we voted on. How fast can that go out today? I guess is my question. And also, who does it come from? Does it come from the two of us because we voted in the affirmative, or does it come from Ken? Or I just wanted to have some clarification on that.
Was that a question for me?
Amy?
I think that's a Ken question.
I mean, typically on how we've done things like that, in the past, I think it could be an all employee email from the chair, or it could be if it's put into a memorandum that's signed by the commissioners who approved it. And then I could send out that memorandum, but this is a message from the board. So it's not, so I think that's the two options available.
Commissioner Bershauer, I would recommend that the letter comes from you since you wrote it, and I will proudly sign it. But perhaps, again, it was a letter that you wrote. I'm agreeing to sign it, happy to do so. But again, would it then come from, Commissioner Bershauer writes the letter and I sign it with her, and then it comes out. How do you disseminate an all employee email when it,
I mean, my recommendation would be, because if you're talking about signatures on the document, would be to maybe put it in memorandum form, and Carrie or Carolina can help put that on the letterhead and get it ready for signature. And then, staff can send it out, see attached from the board via email.
Sounds good to me.
okay, thank you. And as to when we can get that done, would that be hopefully something we could get done by tomorrow?
It could be, if the draft language, how quickly the final draft, I mean, if it's pretty close to final form and what was approved is provided to staff, we can get it on letterhead and then circulate it for signatures and then hit send. So it should be a relatively quick process.
Okay, thank you for that. Anything else, commissioners? Any other updates, announcements?
Chair, I just wanted to note two things, and real quick, is that we have now reached just yesterday the anniversary of the firestorms, both around the state and our community. And I want to extend my thanks both to Emergency Manager Brian Young and administration, and to Chair you, and to Commissioner Bershauer as Commissioner-elect as well, for all the work that you did to keep people safe, to get the fairgrounds up and running and keep them running, and in the aftermath. So thank you for that. I know that folks in other communities are still struggling to rebuild or get back their homes. And I know that some folks in our community have expressed concern as we got closer to that date. So it's been very good to see very few things beyond little spot fires here and there. But I wanted to acknowledge that because it was such a big deal last year. And I also want to acknowledge that we are rapidly, before next meeting, approaching the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attack. So thank you for doing the run. And I will be thinking about it all day. And I've been thinking about it in the days leading up to it, because that's been a turning point for our country.
Likewise, Commissioner Kula, thank you for everything you did last year as well. And I would extend the big thank you to Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue for saving all of those homes on Chehala Mountain. That was incredible. I think we all did a tour of the mountain, so it was just very heartwarming to know that we have that level of service up there. So.
And when you hear the stories about the firefighters who went up there and were feeding and watering livestock while people couldn't get up there to take care of their animals, TVFNR and all of our fire guys in the county have just been exemplary. So our thoughts are with them. Thank you all. If there's nothing else for the good of the order, we'll go ahead and we will adjourn today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.